Francis.
And video is recording. All right. So this meeting is being recorded and it will be available on our website. All right. We are going to move ahead since the folks for the certificate are not available at the moment. And we are moving to the consent agenda. Are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? All right. If there are no objections, the consent agenda will be adopted. All right. The consent agenda has been adopted as is. Thank you. All right. Moving forward to public input. The purpose of this item is to permit members of the audience to address the school committee on non-agenda items. Comments regarding employees must be reserved for executive session as required by state law. At the discretion of the chairperson, audience members may be permitted to speak on regular agenda items. In all cases, comments by members of the public shall be directed to the school committee and be relative to the matter at hand. Comments that pertain to a personal or other student matter should be directed to the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Comments should be brief and not repetitious. All time limits are to be respected. Anyone in the audience would like to come to the podium and speak on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we will move ahead to our student representative.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Today was the 18th day left for the class of 2018, so a little thing. And I think that means that the next school committee meeting, the 21st, will also be my last one. Kind of sad, but oh well. Seniors are wrapping up. Personally, I'm finishing up my senior memoir, which is something that most seniors get the option to do, and I'm so glad I do because it's such an amazing thing to kind of go back through all the different years and kind of wrap it up. We're also in the process of finishing up all the senior activities, which one of them is the senior trip, which is May 25th at Old Orchard Beach. So we're excited for that. We'll have the nice Bill's Pizza, spend the day on the beach, and it'll be nice. We're also finishing up fundraising efforts, doing really well with that, and these funds will go towards stuff like the senior gift, and then also project graduation, which will be at the Waterville Boys and Girls Club the night we graduate. It's full of fun stuff. Besides that, AP testing is this week and next week, so a lot of kids are scramming for these tests that are a couple hours long. Thankfully, we get to go home after and rest before the next one for some kids next day. Last week we had the International Day at the high school, which you probably saw in the Sun Journal. I think they had a little article about it, or I saw it someplace. It was the third one, and it's such a cool opportunity to see all the students come together, kids that you never really see come out and just spread their culture. There's the food. Then this year, even the actual school kitchen participated and gave like their twist on whatever they wanted to, and it was really cool. So, yeah, and that's it for today.
Thank you for that report. I'm sure senioritis with this nice warm weather has fully kicked into high speed at this point.
And yes, we did have senior skip day last Wednesday.
Yep.
When will the seniors be doing the hallways of the elementary schools?
Is the last week of school after we get out, so we have like a week of marching practice, and I believe it's one of those days. Yeah. The 6th, yeah. Okay. Oh, 7th. And we go through the middle school too, which is really cool. They added this year, I think, which I'm looking forward to that more because I know most of the middle school teachers, most of the elementary school teachers are gone by now that I've had. So, yeah.
I know when Superintendent Bill Webster started that, it was from a post that he had seen that other schools were doing, and it's been widely received and well received at our schools. So much so that I know some kids look forward to it now. And I know for my son, my youngest, when he has come to the high school a few times, always very impressed and always looking forward to it. And the big school or the big kids, you know, and the ultimate goal of graduation. So that's always impressive.
If I may, just kind of an interesting story. So the one thing that I've done that I could say it went viral was the post from 2 years ago. And a year ago, it started coming up again. And this week, it started coming up again. It's up to 1,365,000.
Was that our particular walkthrough
No,
or the post?
This was the post that I shared about a walkthrough in Texas.
So that's June 7th is the walkthrough? Okay. Yes, Ms. Hutchinson.
Some of the class of 18 parents are asking that we meet outside the gym at 10 o'clock on that day with placards that say congratulations and you made it, and show these kids that even though they've run the gamut at high school, we are very proud of them, and I would love to have anyone from this board join us.
I know for those youngsters who are seeing the seniors walk through, it's inspiring, but I think it's also reflective and heartwarming to those seniors who are walking through, because they can see themselves in that position and see the growth that they have accomplished, but also the teachers that they've seen through the years as well, and that's when it all comes to light. You would say so, right?
Yeah, just the other day, I know Miss Crafts had a couple of like student leaders at the high school. We went to Montello, I believe, for one of their star student assemblies, and for us high schoolers, we don't think we're that special, but when we walked in, they were giving us high fives. And when we said to be quiet, they were quiet. Like, it was pretty cool. It was really cool for us to see like really how much these kids look up to us, but I can't imagine what it's like for the kids to be like look up to us and see like listen to our advice of what to do and behave and stuff. Yeah.
Well, otherwise a lot of kids don't see that side of it too, so it gives them reflection and hope that someday they'll be there as well. So thank you for doing that, and pass the word to your classmates that it's quite an honor. Did you have information to add to it, Mr.
I did. I
Langlis?
want to add, the parade of graduates is June 6th. My apologies, I said it was the 7th. It's the 6th, and that's from 10 to noon. The elementary schools, and then LMS. And then following that, we feed them lunch at the high school. They break out to each of the schools in 6 different groups, and then they all converge on the middle school and then back to the high school for lunch.
Well, if I'm available, I will certainly be there. I will attempt to bring a video camera, and maybe we'll get a video to go viral. Just for Mr. Webster here. All right, moving ahead. One more thing, okay?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just because you mentioned video camera, then I'll sit down. On Friday, we do have some students doing their AP testing, so we're going to be discreet about it. We're not going to do an announcement, but classrooms are invited to join us outside, weather permitting, to do a 2-sided tunnel to send off our Special Olympics athletes. So we're going to wish them well on Friday morning.
That's this Friday?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that info. Appreciate it. Moving forward, which goes right in line with high school, to receive orders for the Lewiston High School yearbooks. This is a tradition to the school committee, and Mr. Bill Webster will present.
So if Member Kudamarsh could take a look at that and pass it on. So this is the yearbook. It's a great color document. If you would like to have your own copy, we will order that for you, and it'll be at no charge to you. And just let me know before you depart tonight if you would like one. That's fine, but some people haven't seen it yet. I don't know if that will impact, but hands will be fine too. Okay. Would anyone over here like a copy? 1, 2, 3. There is one picture in there, yes.
It's about 3/4 of the way back.
Is it a kickball photo? Alright. Is that it?
So I've got, right now, Megan, Tina, and Francis.
Does the student representative get one, or
He gets one anyway. Of school committee members?
Oh, you were here. Okay. Moving ahead to item number 7, to receive a presentation from the Nutrition Department. Department Director Alyssa Roman will present.
And if I may, just before Alyssa takes off with her presentation, I just wanted to update the school committee, which this may or may not be news for a lot of you. Our nutrition department, unlike most nutrition departments in the state of Maine, is financially independent. The city budget makes no contribution to the nutrition department. In the last district I was from, we contributed $300,000 a year, and it's a tribute to not only the volume and the quality of program that we have, but just great, efficient operations. And I thank Alyssa and her staff for all they do.
Thank you very much. So I'm not sure how many of you know about what we do for nutrition. So I brought a show and tell, which is a lunch tray, because I don't remember the last time everyone's eaten lunch. So you can pass, you know what a lunch tray is. And part of the reason why I brought this tonight, I mean, it's the most like plain looking piece of plastic. But for the amount of meals we serve and what we serve, to make everything look like a 5-star meal on a piece of plastic like that is a really tough challenge. And especially with the kids going through and having the ability to decide what they want. That tray is still like the most efficient way to serve our children every day. So it's the most lame piece of show and tell, but it's pretty fun. So one of the things I want to do is a brief overview, because we talked a little bit about my independence from the general fund, but it's not without independence. And so kind of how does the nutrition program operate? I actually deal with Congress. They approve the laws. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go to Washington, D.C. and march the Hill and meet members from Congress and talk about the current food regulations from the child nutrition laws, which is pretty cool. The USDA recommends laws. They also help enforce them. And then we have the Maine DOE, Child Nutrition Services. They do administrative work, audits. We get audited more than any program in the state because we're so big and wonderful. We have to comply with all purchasing rules for procurement. I have not only the district's rules, but I also have federal guidelines on how I can procure food. I can't just go out and happily go shopping. I need to do some price comparisons. And then our schools finally order foods and help execute menus. The menus come from my office. I have to evaluate them for grains, meat alternates, vegetable subgroups, fruits, dairy, That's just the National School Lunch Program. There's a much more in-depth on programs, which I'll show you. As of today, when I pulled numbers from Power School, this excludes our outplaced students and our LRTC. We were at 5428 for enrollment. Obviously, we do all the schools that are here. There's a lovely picture of some can racks. I have to say, in a district as big as we are, those can racks aren't the most efficient way to store number 10 cans of product. Why? Because when I serve pineapple at the high school, I'm going through 10 cases. 10 cases, 6 cans in them. Yes, somebody is opening that many cans of pineapple just for one day of service. So when we line them up on the rack, you could spend hours putting them on a rack just to pull them all off. It's pretty, the smaller schools, we do good with them, but not the high school. We also have other programs, Lewiston Academy, Star Academy, the Dingley School here. Spurwink is a contracted service that we do. Coburn School, LRTC, even though they're at the high school, they can still eat with us. We invite them, they're part of our programming. And any visiting students are always welcome to dine with us. This does not include our adults. Obviously, our adults we also have in our school, our teachers, and visiting other adults that come through. Here are the USDA programs I use. We talked a little bit about the government aspect. We are a community eligibility provision district, 100% of our district. But what that means is that I had to qualify us by saying how many students in our district have food stamps. I have a list that I have access to, and I have to go through and match up names. So if 100 students came through our line and ate with us, 99 of them I can claim at our free reimbursement rate from the federal government, which is higher than most districts or any district that I've come across in the state of Maine. We are in year 2. We have, or year 1 out of a 4-year, so we'll be going into the 2nd year. So we're in this program for 4 years, and we have the opportunity to rebuy in at the end of the 4 years if this is something our community still wants to participate in. We also have summer food service program. I have another slide showing those numbers. We do 16 sites in the city this year. We're down 2 sites. One is because Montello is moving over to the Geiger site, so that takes Montello and Geiger and merges them. And Kennedy Park has opted actually not to do their aquatics this year, partially because the numbers have dropped. A lot of the kids are participating in other sites at that time in the city, whether it's the B Street Center or Tree Street or summer school. So they have opted to do something different this year. We have the National School Lunch Program. This is how we feed our lunch and the reimbursement from it. We have our school breakfast program, after school snack program. We have a fresh fruit and vegetable grant. That grant gives us grant money for the elementary schools and the middle school. The high school, although their demographics and the income qualifies them, they are too old to participate in that program. Otherwise, we could have the whole district in. And then the last one I put up there is we are looking into a child and adult care food program, which would be for next year. And what that would enable me to do is to convert some of that after-school snack program into potential supper meals for students that are longer at school in the afternoon with activities, which is something that will be incredibly valuable, especially when the buses are getting kids home later in the evening. And it can also benefit our sports programs if they wish to participate, so they don't have to stop at McDonald's. We can pack them out some food, which is kind of fun. So 54,000 meals is what we did last summer for the short period of 39 days. That means that on July, when summer school's opening, we're doing about 4,000 meals a day with a staff of 12. It's a lot of food. During this year so far, this goes up to April 30th, 38,000 after school snacks, a little over 38,000. That fresh fruit and veggie program money that we spent $91,000 on fresh fruit and veggies. That's fully reimbursable from our grants that we have. We have our breakfast down there. Again, this is through April, so we'll have May's a busy month for us. So 337,000 breakfasts, 580,000 lunches, and I put down the daily amounts there. So we saw the enrollment. So what's interesting is that even though you have 100% food at no cost to the students, you do not get 100% participation, and nor do I expect it. You're always going to have the family that will opt to bring food from home, the child that does not wish to participate, or at the high school level, you might have a child or student that wishes to buy just the sandwich or a Powerade versus buying the whole meal. Obviously, the best bang for anyone's buck would be to participate in the program, but it is obviously not a requirement. These are some pictures. We do salads. I have some of the cooks from Farwell up there. That's Italian Day down below. One of my members, Kyle, doing that. And then we have tons of paperwork we're always doing. Here is what's also in your packet. I got a laser pointer on this as well. So one of the things that I really wanted to share, and I actually added something that's not on your packet, which is up here. So this big, lots of numbers, and I can certainly answer any questions you guys have on this. Up top, we have the comparison of breakfasts from FY17 to FY18. This is a projection. And so we're on track to be ahead of where we're at with our numbers. I have our staff members here. We're up to 75 staff members in our district. And over here, we have our revenues and expenses. You'll notice that, yes, we did lose some money. We do have a fund balance that nutrition carries. Last year, we did lose some money. But I upgraded our software, which was a huge expense. Our production records, we have grown, and we need to have a software system to run that. Also, our delay days affect me. I still need my staff to come in to prepare food for lunch, even when there's a 2-hour delay. So when you're warm in your bed, think of my lunch ladies and men driving in, because they are. And so they are showing up. And so obviously we're paying out those benefits for them and their salaries as they show up, but I have no money coming in. I'm like a true restaurant where I need that revenue to come in to offset. This year we are on track to make $93,000. This will go back to replenish that fund balance. One of the things I have to do is pay for my small wares. So that's every compressor that breaks, booster that breaks, any sheet pans, those lunch trays. We bought $8,000 worth a few years ago. So all of those things come out of my budget. So we want to replenish that and have enough on hand, obviously, to continue this effort going forward. Participation, this is kind of fun. So we have 2016 to 17 and 17 to 18. And at the bottom, we have this change year over year of who's participating. Breakfast is up 0.2%, lunch is up 3.6%. It changes from school to school. I've noticed a trend, whether it be administrators in the schools, timing that we serve our meals, how many students we have per meal seating, where the timing, the scheduling are broken down. We can kind of figure out pretty quickly if you have a lunch period where 200 kids are trying to go through in 10 minutes, some kids don't want to wait in line. It makes sense. So we're always looking with administration on how to work that out. I know next year the middle school is looking to do 4 lunch periods. I couldn't be happier. It's going to be a better scenario for those middle schoolers to have a little more time to eat. I'm also looking at how I can get some better software set up as far as the computer systems to use some of the Wi-Fi technology. So like the high school, we have the cafeteria, but are there other places where I can find those high schoolers in the morning and maybe sell them some breakfast? So those are some things I'm looking at. Overall, though, our participation, we were at 79.4% for lunch and 45.1% for breakfast. And if this is the state average, I grabbed off the state website today. The state average for breakfast is 30%, and for lunch is 52%. There are some districts that obviously they're just not serving meals. I even went and did some comparison, part of my, let's see how big we are. We are the biggest operation in the state. We are larger than Portland. We serve more meals than Portland. We have more revenue than Portland. So I went and I crunched my numbers. So it's pretty much us, then Portland, and then Bangor as far as big school districts doing these programs. So some things that we're doing that you may or may not be aware of, because it's different than maybe when you had school lunch. We have standardized recipes we use in our location. This is partially for the nutritional content too, so I'm looking to make sure that, you know, if an athlete's trying to bulk up or a student's trying to slim down, that there's some consistent calorie counts. We offer there is a possibility a student can come through and take everything they see that day that's available. And yes, their calorie count at the high school level could be much higher, but we do keep track of an overall weighted calorie count for the week. But this is just school lunch. It does not obviously encompass what they're eating at home, snacks, vending machines, all that good stuff. We have at least 3 entree offerings daily at any location. We have fresh salad bar offerings daily. We have to use low-fat or non-fat milk. We have 100% whole grain rich products. We do use local apples, milks, pizza, fruit in season. If the student has allergies or has concerns, we have a way of dealing with that through doctor's notes and working with the parent to see if we can get the best for the student. Everything that I'm looking at has reduced sodium, reduced sugar, and we use what's called smart snacks in our vending machines and our a la carte purchases, which means that I've looked at calorie count, sodium content, and it has to have whole grain fruits, vegetables inside. So it's kind of it's not just some food on that tray and here you go, some tuna noodle casserole, sorry. This is just kind of, when we talk about reimbursement, this is more, I put this in here so you guys can see, I get paid in pennies. So if I have, 30 free students that walk through, you have a free rate. We are a severe need district. So after school snack, here's a good example. I have to serve 2 components to these students. So I need to give them a milk and maybe it's a cracker or Teddy Graham or something. It's not a lot, but I only get 88 cents for that. And that also includes our labor and workers' comp and benefits and everything else. So when you actually look at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of money that the government gives us to do some of these things. And that's why some districts do end up giving money to nutrition programs, is because they don't have the volume of people participating to make up that difference. We do have volume, so that helps us. These are the rates for 2018. They go up by pennies. We get 6 cents also for participating accurately in the meal program that they have given us from the government. So an extra 6 cents a meal. So it does, it makes it interesting when you're crunching numbers. My staff, I got 75 staff members, obviously. I have me as the director. I have a nutrition operations specialist, administrative assistants. We have 9 managers, 4 aides. We're actually up to 10 managers. We have 4 aides, 4 subs, 55 food service workers. We have over 30 staff that are food safety certified. That's something that I pride them on. They are ServSafe certified. I teach and proctor that and do courses not only here, but I actually went over to RSU 18 and taught them, so I teach for other districts as well. That money that I earn for that goes back into our program so we can teach more of our staff. And we also have members of the Maine School Nutrition Association and National School Nutrition Association. Some of the community events that we do, I'm part of the Good Food Council of the Lewiston Auburn. We also participate in the Farm to School Committee. 5210, there's a school nutrition directors group. We have the Maine School Nutrition Association. There's a district wellness committee, which we'll talk about a little later. There is a group that I'm part of called Team Up for Success. I'm one of their mentors for other directors in the state of Maine. And we also participate yearly in the Maine Farm to School Cook-Off, which they've done. This is the 3rd year, which I pride myself on putting my staff members in there instead of me so I can watch what they do. This year it was in Bath. It was fun. I do send to Bill a fair amount of pictures when I have them come across from all the different schools so we can repost them. Our most recent one was National School Lunch Hero Day, which was actually on May 4th, which was also Diversity Day. And I had one school, Montello, that they all decided to make capes for each other, which was really sweet of them. So they were their own superheroes for the day. And it made a big difference. The kids could see the active participation from the school lunch program. Oh, we've reached the end. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, comments, feedback.
Mr. Jensen would like to ask or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation. Great visuals, by the way. Just
Thanks.
not related to nutrition, but like I'd say, thank you very much for the work you do for the students, as well as a lot of students that live in poverty. The work you guys do is incredible. A couple of questions I have. It sounded like it's a yes, but did the fund balance cover the entire amount of the losses?
Yes, it did. So the Nutrition fund balance is a protected fund. It has USDA special rules. So if for some reason I was showing a huge surplus, there's ways that obviously, like I have to pay for my workers' comp and benefits and things like that, but the money goes back into the nutrition program. I'm also not allowed to have bad debt. And so what that means is that we are CEP, but we have students that maybe have been with the district, you know, before we were CEP, and they still might owe me money. We still try and collect on that. So if people are getting robocalls periodically saying their child owes a balance, it's because we're like an old library. Eventually, when they reach seniors, we still try and collect on that money. And at the very end, we're looking to have compensation for those food and that meal that we provided, even when they were in first grade. So it's a long process.
Let's see. The second question I had is, if you can't think of anything, it's okay, but do you know of any like impending or pressing issues for the nutrition department that's like, I guess concerning may not be the right word, but anything you'd want us on the school committee to consider, something down the road that we may have to deal with? Anything
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so we have various states of the kitchen, and so there's always, with kitchen equipment that is used as heavily as we're using this is commercial kitchen equipment. When I'm replacing things, I have to get something that's going to stand the test of time, and those things are not cheap. So I know I'm really excited for the new school. That will help a lot with Longley and Martell, because if not, Martell had some fair amount of major ovens that they need, and when we start getting those, the oven itself may be $20,000, but when you start putting in the gas line or lack of gas line and hand washing sinks. So when we update our kitchens, we also have to be up to code with any state and local regulatory rules, and so that makes it difficult. So I know down the line, I mean, there's always dreams of the high school eventually getting, you know, its own little facelift, but it all comes down to, you know, where the money's at. Some of the kitchen equipment that's in there is beautiful. It's beautiful stainless steel. We don't have grease in our kitchen, so if you go into a normal commercial kitchen, the hoods get full of grease, the floor gets really greasy because of fryers and flat tops and charbroilers. We don't have that because we don't have fryers. We don't have charbroilers in the kitchen. So it's kind of nice. Our kitchen equipment, we replaced the dishwasher at Montello. I think it was just a little over a year ago. It was a $40,000 dishwasher, and that dishwasher was over 40 years old. And why? Because we're able to keep good care of it. So I know some of the things I look at is storage for food, making sure like our compressors, we have a storage facility at Montello, eventually those units, they're going to need some overhaul on them. And so we look at frequency. I keep track of how often we're repairing things, so I can recommend that that's where we spend some money. This year, it's spending some money on software. We're still running XP on our computers, and they crash a little too much for me. So I love being IT specialist on Monday morning, but I'm excited to upgrade some of that stuff. Yeah.
On the slide for reimbursement rate, I was curious how, now that it's district-wide free lunch, do you still have a lot of parents returning the forms? And if you don't have a lot of parent participation, how do you determine where each student falls for the reimbursement?
Excellent question. And so I have a magical number, or a date of April 1st. I still have a list I have to go through 3 times a year that has over 7,000 entries on it for those that have food stamps and TANF, or temporary food stamps, in the city of Lewiston. I also have access to the entire state of Maine database. And I have to go through, even though we're in for 4 years, I go through multiple times a year and line up individuals with those food stamps. So I'm able to keep and maintain us. I can share that district information in a way that's confidential with Power School, which helps us with our funding formula. And then we also send out, mass mail out those income eligibility forms saying, are you eligible or not, or where's your income at? And those forms, we get back a stack about this big in September. We are still, even though it says on it, this is not a free and reduced lunch form, we have so many parents that check off, like, they check the box and like, I get free lunch. And so we still have, our community is slightly different than some others because a lot of people recognize that they get benefits here. So we have gotten a really good return on those separate forms, which is great. But the CEP data that I use for reimbursement is completely separate from those forms. It always has to be. I can't combine those forms, and that data I get separate because of the way that it's filled out. Yeah.
Yeah, just to that point, and I'd like to ask a follow-up question, Alyssa. You made reference to the state funding formula, which has a factor in it for the district percentage of free and reduced lunch. And given that we're now a CEP district, parents don't have the same incentive to complete that form because it's not a requirement to get the lunch. How do we still have that strong participation?
I had it hit. Okay, thank you. That's a great question. So part of going into the community eligibility provision, I sat and I crunched out numbers in many different, and looking at how other school districts are dealing with schools that no longer want to fill out those forms, because a parent can say, well, I already get free lunch, so why should I fill out that form? What we have happening in our district, we have such a large percentage of families participating in the free and reduced food stamps that the state offers through DHHS. I can directly certify about 61.5% of our entire population through food stamps alone. I then go through the list and I'm able to, those numbers that come in, we notice actually a lot of duplicates. What I find is that we're able to trend pretty darn close to where we had been showing our numbers with that funding formula percent in the past. But I do have my eye on that, because if that funding formula, if all of a sudden those forms stop coming in, then really what the carrot is we don't get to participate in the CEP anymore, because if I might be fine as a lunch program, but if the school's losing money, then why am I participating in that? So that's the kind of the balance of it. The other thing is if the school, or not the school, but the economy of the area increases and I can't directly certify people, we get locked in for 4 years. But at that end of that 4 years, we might have a decision to make that it's not in our best interest to be in this community eligibility provision. And we might have to go back to free and reduced and paid. So we have to look at that. So it's a fine balance of looking at that number that's coming in. So I work heavily, especially in the October counts. I'm just as in there, making sure that our numbers aren't swinging too far, because I'm very concerned that if the school funding formula is taking a dive, we can say right then 30 days we're out of the CEP and we can go back to the old way of collecting free, reduced, and paid applications, and I can verify you for income. So we do have some options as far as that's concerned, which is kind of nice to know that we're not stuck in this or stuck with our funding formula being not okay and losing money for other things.
Mr. Kerr?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good information. So can you tell me about the program on, is there a program that certain things have to be on a child's tray? And then I recently did some tours of school, and I just thought there was an incredible amount of waste. So can you just share your thoughts about that?
I will happily share my thoughts on that. So food waste is something that is near and dear to me. And what's hard is that the federal program says if you want to have a free lunch with me today, you need to have at least 3 things on your tray, full components. So we have milk, we have grain, we have meat alternate, fruits and veggies. So to go through the line, the kids have to have at least 3 things on their tray. A half a cup has to be fruit or vegetable. So as an adult, we're like, wow, that's a lot to think about. The children, the students have gotten pretty trained because we've done this. It's been in place since 2012. What the federal government never looked at, or they look at now and go, oh, gee, is that you're requiring kids to take food. You can't make a kid eat. You can't make a student eat. You can't make an adult eat. So I think of like my family, when I make a meal for 4 for my family and my kids don't want to eat. Yeah, you try and save on leftovers on things, but there's a certain amount that at the end of the day, there's going to be some that go into the waste stream. So take that times 5,400 students. And you're right, there is a lot of waste. And when a student goes through the line and they don't want to take a fruit or a vegetable, so they grudgingly take an apple and then walk 3 feet and throw it away, it's disheartening. So one of the things that we did, I know last year we did a pilot program for composting. Composting doesn't stop the food from being produced and being used. The government views it as if a child puts it on their tray, the government's giving me money for it. I have my reimbursement for that food. It doesn't stop the problem. The problem we have is a culture that food's going into the trash. So I'm always open for suggestions on how we can meet my program regulations as far as get the appropriate food on the tray. So we're obviously getting our money to cover our program. But at the same time, I mean, some of it's as simple as, you know what, kids don't like lima beans. Don't force kids to take lima beans, offer them something else. So having pineapple tidbits, kids love pineapple tidbits. So having foods they like is always a good thing. Not forcing them to take an apple and orange at the end, also good. Doing taste testing with the students. We can recoup on a very small point or a small amount. We can have some share tables. The issue is they need to be manned. We need to make sure that if Jimmy took the apple, it has a peel, an edible peel. There's no way we can wash it and the Maine CDC says no. Luckily, one of the things that we've never had to deal with in mass is a foodborne illness outbreak. So that's the other part, is how much food can you recoup on successfully without further endangering other students. So, you know, prepackaged items, that's an easy recoup on. Milk, if it's time temperature abused, I can't recoup or take it back in. I also can't, if a child doesn't want their milk and I'm able to save it by keeping it cold, I can't resell it because I already got the money for it. So I have to do it in such a way as to give it to programs. So we do deal with, like, we'll run into the end of the year here. We'll use a lot of food back into the summer program that we have left over. It's our buying. We look at our buying. But I'm also looking at if we have milk and I know it's going to expire and it's school vacation, I'm going to call up different food banks in the area and work with them. So we work closely with Good Shepherd if need be. So I'm making sure it goes out. We also use the backpack program. So if we have a little bit extra, I'm going to push it out. The McKinney-Vento students are homeless students as well. So we try not to. It's hard once it hits their tray though. I can't go and recoup on a lot of that because of the foodborne illness issue. Yeah.
I'm going to put one of our experts on the line here, and just curiosity, ask Mr. Hurd what his favorite meal at the high school is.
I was actually going to ask to say something. Whatever changed at the high school this year, I don't know if it's like the new, I don't know what he's called, but Fern, everybody loves him. He cares so much about the food. It's crazy. Everybody talks about him, knows him by like first name. But the food that he's bringing in, whether it's like the Caesar salads, all the salads, but in particular the Caesar salads, my favorite. And then like the other day I had a chicken pesto pizza. That was so good. Like, like people like are actually like really, like I was looking at the numbers like projected. I feel like the high schools probably end up being higher because everybody's really eating. Like we go look up like what's on the special, like all the different lines, all the different like events. Like there's probably once a week he does like a new event. Like I know Super Bowl, we had a Super Bowl thing. Thanksgiving, we had this huge Thanksgiving meal. Christmas, we had something. Easter, we had something. Like it's really cool. So yeah, props to that.
Yeah, no, so that's one of the things that I'm happy when you get the right manager in the right place, you can take that energy and move forward. We had chicken tikka masala on, and I had this recipe for a couple years, and the kitchen made it, and they're like, oh, it wasn't good. I was like, well, how'd you show it to the kids? So Fern made it. I said, Fern, just do me a favor and make it. So because the chicken curry is so popular. So we made it. And then he's like, well, I don't know how many kids are going to eat it. And I said, well, put it in 2-ounce cups and meet them in the line. So before they even make a decision, have them eat. So it's called behavioral economics, and we might use a little bit on you. But Fern then called me up and said we sold out. And then I had the students saying that was the best meal, have it every day. Now, if I had it every day, you guys would be like, please no. But we're transitioning away from please let me just have pizza every day or chicken nuggets. Now the back deli isn't the deli anymore. It's the back salad area. And now I have a salad bar. And so when we had diversity day, guess what? I had guacamole out there. And that was something, you know, a little different. So the perception of our staff is changing, and it takes that person with energy. So I'm super excited. That's awesome feedback. So yeah, thank you.
You mentioned in some information on calorie counts. Is that available to the student? Like they know how much is calorie, or is that just kind of?
That is an
something-
excellent question. So our vending machines, I do have those. So our vending machines and all the drinks and stuff, that's a requirement. So I have a breakdown of those sheets. Now the actual food going through the line, that would be that software program I'm talking about. So the calorie count, I was actually looking today and I'm like, I need to make tiny little signs to put, especially at the high school level and elsewhere. But what we find is that the combinations of food change, and so it makes it a little difficult. So I do have calorie counts on all 950 items we buy. And so obviously no different than any food-based database of figuring out what you're eating in any given day. I think having those entrees and having out there what they are, but most of the entrees, the portion sizes, we're only talking about 200 calories tops for most of the entree portions because it's not huge. So that's one of the things that I'm super excited as we go into the new year with our new software that I'm able to really focus on is giving that detail more. But yes, at any given time, we do deal with a lot of students that are diabetics and the nurses. So I have this database. It's just very huge. You can also find all the nutritional information for all 950 items online on our website. It has the manufacturer, has the information where it comes from. It also has, you can search it up. So, and that's web-based, so you can do it. It's on our Google platform. So I did do that a couple summers ago so people could look at that up at a whim. A lot of the products that we buy, you can't find in the store. So you're going to find Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but you can't find this Cinnamon Toast Crunch because there's so much fiber and whole grains in it and low sodium and low sugar. So it's interesting. Trix yogurt has taken all artificial colors and flavors out of their yogurt, and they're actually the cheapest yogurt going and the healthiest yogurt going. So it's kind of interesting as the manufacturers get more savvy and realize how many school kids are eating in the country every day, they change it, but then they don't put it on the store shelves. So as adults, I'm like, you're totally eating a toaster strudel, but it's not a toaster strudel. And I'm sure you can tell me, like, it might say cinnamon roll, but when you're getting it, it's not the cinnamon roll you were thinking. It's not a Cinnabon. It's a little different, a little more fiber and whole grain in it. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, yes, but online you can find that huge database. But as far as going through the line with it right there, that's something I need to work on.
I think if at the grocery store they just had a school aisle, they
Yes.
actually might improve your numbers because people could actually buy it and encourage their kids to eat it or mix it up with something else. So thanks for that info. So I brought the calorie count up because I kid you not, my 15, going to be 16 tomorrow year-old, as soon as he took health or whatever and he learned about calories, he comes home and talks about calories and what he ate, and it makes me feel bad for what I'm eating. But he might become a dietitian or something someday. I don't know. But he's totally aware of it, and he tells me what he had at lunch. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. So thank you for that information.
Absolutely. We also, we had an intern approach us. So we have an intern or an extern coming in the fall for a week from Iowa. They're in a registered dietitian program, so they've opted to spend the week with me and learn what we do as part of their rotation. So I'm kind of excited to have them go through. So this opens up we're kind of feeding other future dietitians. All good things.
And something I heard on the way, I was in Connecticut last night, and I was listening to public radio, and they mentioned that as of today or tomorrow, nationwide restaurants are supposed to have information on calorie counts in their menus.
I'm thrilled. I think this is really good because there's so many restaurants you go and the portions are 3 times as large. And when you're eating 1,400 calories in a sitting, that's a little much.
Just a curiosity, you brought up Portland, and I don't mean to pick on Portland. I'm sure you're not either, but it's just a number of fact. How many people in the Portland schools have your position?
There is one director in Portland. Then they have a setup of an office where they have managers in the central kitchen. So they opted to do a central commissary kitchen. And so we still have 8 individual schools, and even though the high school makes for Longley, Longley still has some kitchen in there. So the Portland now has a central processing facility. I actually got to tour it a few years ago. They mass produce all their fruits and vegetables and stuff. They put it in little containers, Hutamaki, Chinette, and they overwrap them with plastic. then they put them in a blast chiller. So today is Monday. They made the food for Monday either Thursday of last week or Friday. And then it oversat the weekend in the refrigerator, and then they packed it in trucks and warmers and sent it out, and then they heated it up on site. So I looked at that and I'm like, oh, so with that being said, how many people? There's a director, then they have a manager of the high schools in there dealing with recipes and menus. They have a manager of elementary schools. They have they had food corps members last time I was aware. They had a central receiving person receiving food. Then they have an executive chef that's also overseeing the menus. So when I look at that, I'm like, we're doing pretty good with what we have. I also like that we don't have a central kitchen. I would never advocate for one. It takes away from that personal ability to know the students. It also is offering livelihood for many people in the community. I mean, I have 75 people, so I advocate for that. I'm able to get more staff from restaurants and have culinary degrees. And so I look at that as a feather in our cap that we're able to, when we have positions available, we're able to hire pretty quickly. My nutrition operations specialist, he recently left May 2nd. He's going to be the new city sanitarian for the city of Lewiston. I support that. I think that's awesome that he's able to move over in the field. So we're able to, again, recruit. It's a highly coveted position in the state. So I'm pretty excited to be hiring for that.
Thanks for that information. The reason I ask is because I like to showcase the many hats that our staff wears here, including yourself. And I understand that you'll be taking on a new role soon in the future with transportation as well. So those of you who may have remembered that during the budget cycle, we'll be hearing from you within the year about transportation as well as nutrition.
Absolutely. And we already have Butch Pratt that's been in my office. There's already a lot that coincides, whether it's field trips. Every time everyone asks for a field trip, they forget to ask for food. And usually when there's busing issues, it's really easy to be like, oh, there's so much that crosses over. A lot of people would be like, how does that even work? It does. So it's actually been a really good fit just having him up in my office. So it's been a good team.
And I'm full of questions tonight. So just to touch a little bit more, you sparked my interest about if you were to like totally lose food and that had to be whatever it was, a born allergy or something. But do we have backup generators when all power fails?
Yeah, so when we talk about equipment replacement and needs, yeah, we have a generator system at the high school. That's it. I have $158,000 worth of inventory in this district as we speak today. So what ends up happening is we have such a huge amount of food we're able to purchase. I call up our distributor at North Center in Augusta. A lot of them I live in Winthrop, a lot of them happen to live there too. And I'm able to say to them, you will get me a tractor trailer with a generator on it today. And then I work with facilities to get the custodians there, and they help us load that food. So knock on wood, we have not come to that. We do have some coolers that go down. I do get calls at 2, 3 in the morning. Me and Louis Turcotte and I have nice conversations about the game plan. We also have emergency services show up. I actually just interviewed for a new vendor, so we can use a couple different vendors for our refrigeration needs, because if those go down, I will be very sad. Occasionally, if like we have a foodborne illness outbreak, romaine lettuce, that was the cool happening thing. As soon as I see that, I have a direct phone call from the USDA letting me know. I'm already on the phone with my vendors. We have 4 produce vendors that we buy from, and I need to make sure that the codes are not matching Yuma, Arizona, or any other. So spinach was the rockin' green of the week. And so we do have protocol in place. So that's just part of the normal. It could happen at any moment. So we're kind of ready for that. We also keep ghost trays of food. What does that mean? Is that I tape a sample of everything we serve on a tray. So if someone did say we had a foodborne illness outbreak, all that food could go to the CDC within minutes and be analyzed. So we'd have a quicker determination of any foodborne illness if it actually came from the cafeteria or not, as well as testing employees. So we have protocols in place there, so kind of fail safes, because we do serve such an extreme amount of people. We just never want to risk that.
You don't miss a beat, really. So I will say that you're very charismatic every time I've heard you speak, so thank you for that.
Thanks.
one suggestion, maybe criticism, would be you talk about all this food and you don't bring any. He said, he
I hear
mentions
that.
pizza, so even if it's cold, bring it next time. You know? So that'll sell us right there. That'll be it. Were there any other questions or comments from the board? Well, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate your time and involvement. Thank you. To receive and vote to allow the reconsideration of entering into a regional service center. So this is, we had previously discussed this, although I wasn't part of the discussion. I was away at the time. I think Ms. Ray was away as well. And so I decided to bring this back up and to see if there was a reconsideration. We can certainly discuss it, but I would need a motion from someone who voted it down, I think, last time. Is that correct?
Which was the prevailing side, yes.
It was the prevailing side. So is there any discussion or a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we reconsider the April 2nd, 2018 rejection of entering into a regional service center agreement with other school districts.
All right, I have a motion by Ms. Hutchinson. I can receive a second by anybody on the board. And a second by Mr. Kerr. Discussion from the board. Ms. Hutchinson.
So I spent my time emailing Ms. Payne and asking my questions. I believe we all got an email that gave us a list of programs that could be a possible. I've watched the other districts' meetings. I've asked Mr. Webster some questions regarding feasibility. I'm adamant that 3 to 5 year olds are not included. New programs are not included. And I'm adamant that there has to be school committee representation from each set of the schools involved on their board of directors. I'm still not completely comfortable, as the other 3 districts have already signed their contracts, and my understanding is they've signed 2, one with Lewiston, one without. So I don't know how our stipulations could be worked in, but I'm willing to at least hear thoughts from everybody else.
Okay, so there's a motion by Ms. Hutchinson, Mr. Kerr. This is just to reconsider the motion, and then after, if it is approved, then we'll move on to the next subject, but if not, we won't. So is there any other discussion before we move ahead? Mr. Webster.
So to the point that Member Hutchison made, the motion that was considered last time did say something to the effect that Lewiston would withdraw after the first year if the agreement wasn't changed to allow board participation. So that is an example of how this board could consider adoption of the agreement, but have an out if the things that the board insists on do not take place. And again, that would be for the next agenda item if this passes for reconsideration. One could vote for reconsideration but still vote against entering into the agreement.
Any other discussion? Discussion from the public? Seeing none, we'll have a vote. Those in favor? Those against? And I don't think we need to go abstain. Okay. So that is a 6-3. Vote carries forward to the next item, to receive and vote on a motion to enter into a regional service center agreement. I'll open this up for discussion. Mr. Kerr, is there a second on this one? No, now we're moving to item number 9. And 9 by a second by Ms. Roy. All right, open back to discussion from the board.
So I am to understand that the motion was just to enter into a regional service center. I think we should have a discussion.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned, I am not comfortable voting for a regional service center without some stipulations put in the motion.
All right, and I'm just curious, how many of us need you to reach out by email or telephone to Mary Payne? I know Tina said she did, yeah. Okay, and I did myself as well. And she was going to send you some information. Did you receive that information?
I did not receive any additional information that hadn't already been shared with the board.
It was information in regards to other service area, other areas that had form service areas.
So yes, in the packet is the DOE news announcement, which makes reference to those other centers, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, and I didn't get to that too far.
That's in the board packet.
Okay. One of the things that she had mentioned was that most districts did not start with something very elaborate and so forth. It was 2 or 3, because I think the minimum is 2. So you have to enter into the agreement with 2 items. I think we have more than 2 from what I saw on the list, but they were easier items to work with in the beginning.
And those items are intended to be examples of what might happen. They're not what will happen necessarily.
Okay. And I had some questions about the interlocal agreement as well. I'll have to skim through here as discussion goes through. One of the things that it mentioned in here was that in the first year, the agreement is to be in a service center for 2 years. Is that correct? Just want to confirm that instead of 1 year. I read that in the first year it's 2 years, and in the third year it's just year by year.
Right. So there's nothing that prevents a school district from withdrawing after a year, but absent any other action, the agreement lasts for 2 years.
Yeah. And that's how I understood it, and the way I discussed it with Ms. Payne is that there was no penalty to drop out, even though the agreement was for 2 years. It wouldn't be nice, of course, for the other districts, but we could drop out at any time. Whether we got approval from the state or not, there's no like penalties. The only penalty we would lose is that the funds that are dedicated by the regional service center for those schools, you would lose that portion that you would gain from. So I thought that was interesting to hear and hear from her. Ms. Roy?
So just to clarify, we would not have to have permission from the commissioner?
It would be nice and polite to ask permission from him, but I mean, there's no penalties for us to say, hey, we're just gonna walk away from this, in other words.
But
and that's
don't
how
the
I read.
words in here say that? I just.
And what I'm reading here too. I mean, anybody could walk away. It wouldn't be polite, of course. It wouldn't be the way it's written, but there is basically no penalties other than what you would lose from the gain that you would get from being in the service center. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And another clarification, so I second the motion, but so I don't know if this has to change, but with the understanding that we are not taking on the CDS piece of this. Like, we haven't decided those 2 things that we're going to work on.
So DOE was informed by me representing Lewiston and by the other districts that there was no interest in pursuing the FEDIS grant. So that issue is now dead, even if this board wanted to it. The grant funds have been withdrawn and are no longer available to Lewiston.
Ms. Hutchinson?
So when I talked to Miss Payne, one of the things I questioned was what happens if 3 of the 4 districts wanted to do this item and Lewiston did not want to do the chosen item. And her response was we didn't have to do what the other districts wanted to do. We could just not do it, as long as we were doing 2 items under the center. So let's say they wanted to do pre-K and we wanted to do nutrition and substitutes. We wouldn't be forced to do pre-K, just as an example, as long as we were doing 2. There is a way we can use the programs we already have to improve programs for our students. There's also a way we can use programs we are already doing to raise revenue for our district, such as by providing professional development opportunities for programs that we're already doing well. ELL, for a school that doesn't have a large ELL population but is starting to, we could provide professional development around that. Or we are universal pre-K. There are other districts that are not, that we could assist them in professional development around setting them up. So there are some opportunities that could benefit this district. Gifted and talented is another. We could work with other districts to get another staff person and share them and provide more opportunities for our gifted and talented. So one of the things that would be required by me to support this would be we have to do what benefits our kids and our district and not take on new projects.
So I guess I'm not sure I totally agree with Tina, because there may be some new projects that it turns out could be quite beneficial to be working in a regionalization capacity. You know, we're just getting ready to go to a vote for the budget. The taxpayers of the community, other elected officials in the city, us, we all complain about the cost of education. This is an opportunity for us to do something that might actually reduce the impact on taxpayers. The problem with this whole system, or the whole beginning, is one, it created this major program of adding above what we're required to by law for education purposes, the 3 to 5. So I think that in itself was very challenging for us, or at least it was challenging for me. And although I think there are flaws still in this, we will be able to control this. And it may take passionate voices, but I can assure you, if our superintendent's sitting here and we're all screaming about something or the direction that this is going in, he's going to do what he just did between the time period where this didn't pass to now. He's going to find changes that may make it acceptable. I really think if we vote against this, we're truly doing a disservice to the taxpayers of this community, because we can make the needed changes. All we're gonna have to do is put some pressure on there, political pressure. So it may not, you know, we may have to be reaching out to other school committees. I mean, truly, we can control the direction of this if we see it going in a direction that is not beneficial to our district. Most of the stuff Tina said I would be acceptable to adding as amendments. I just want to make sure that we allow some flexibility to Bill as he negotiates this further with the service center, because we don't want to go in there with a heavy hand. That'll set the tone, I think, in the wrong direction right from the beginning. But again, just most of the stuff Tina mentioned, I would be fine with adding to the motion.
I may have missed something somewhere, but if we're no longer seeking the FEDIS grant, that was the $200,000 that we were concerned with prior? No, the $200,000 is separate from that. Okay, so if we agree to this now, we're still getting the 200,000, but we're not considering taking on the CDS. Is that correct?
That's correct. The FEDIS grant is dead. If this is approved today, we'll retain the little over $191,000 of additional subsidy, which at this point isn't in our budget because we took it out. And so if approved, and we'll see what happens with the budget vote tomorrow, but those are unallocated funds that would be at the discretion of the school committee.
To add to that, I asked that question to Ms. Payne as well. And as long as we're moving forward as a school committee for a regional service center, even if we send it to voters and they decide to vote against it, but we continue to move forward for it, we'll receive that money, the 191,000 or 200,000, however you want to disclose it. And so say we have an election in June, voters bring it down, they say we don't want it, we can bring it back up again in the fall if we wanted to, or have a special election in January and we'll still receive the funds. And then next year it's supposed to double, so what we're supposed to receive. So, but as long as we're showing that we're trying to move forward with this, is the way she described it. So, and yes, previously, last year when the discussion started, there was some confusion to services that we currently use in the area, in the school, like Auburn and Lewiston currently work with. So that the way that was described to us from Mr. Webster was that we couldn't work with those subject matter because we already have them. But in fact, we can have them, and I think you understand that now. We can work with those as long as we're showing improvements in those areas, and then we have plenty of those that we can certainly improve with, like adult ed, or that's the biggest one I can think of off the top of my head. But so there are certainly areas that we can work with that we've already worked with, and some definitely that we haven't even started yet. But I would suggest that we start working with things that we currently work on. Another thing that she explained, realistically, the state doesn't know what we are currently working on with other districts, so we could just tell them and they'd be okay, because nobody's really scoping that out. It looks like you have something to add to that.
Well, just to that point, we already have a working agreement with Auburn in regard to RETC, which is a special ed program for middle school students. And the other two districts are also at the table. Some of them are not as participating members. And so that's going to be a fairly easy thing to streamline it a little bit and have it already meet one of the components of this. So if the board approves it, we're comfortable that we can come up with at least two programs, and probably initially just those two programs, that this board would be very supportive of.
Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Before I share my passionate comments, I did want to ask, for procedural sake, when we voted to reconsider the motion, does a second motion have to be made again, or do we just go back to the previous motion that was made by the first person who made the motion and seconded it? Because I'm like, if we're moving to reconsider a motion that's already been made. So therefore, the motion's already been made. We don't need a second one here. So we're kind of...
I'm just going to first be polite and pass it on to our parliamentarian.
Hello. So you were correct. The first agenda item number 9 doesn't really need to exist. That vote on agenda item number 8 automatically moved us into it. But it's fine. For the most part, we're still acting on the same motion that was made, and we can make amendments to it at this point. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I was just thinking we weren't doing it the right way, and first time to speak up. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
But to that point, because I think that Mr. Care's motion wasn't necessarily that original motion, so I think a ruling about the way the agenda was set up was, if the reconsideration passed, that any motion that related to entering into regional service center agreement would be an acceptable motion to make. If, however, we're interpreting it narrowly to reconsider the original motion, as you said, then that motion would be along the lines to approve a regional service center agreement, but that absent board representation, we would withdraw after a year if the agreement weren't changed. I have my own opinions on which motion was okay, but I'll defer to the parliamentarian.
I hear you, Mr. Webster, but I think so the first part was to receive and vote to allow the reconsideration of entering into a regional service center. We went through that, and now we're talking about to receive and vote any motion to enter into a regional service center. So it's a different, I mean, it's the same topic, but it's just a different motion. Right, right. So we're reconsidering the topic, is what Ms. Parks is saying. I'm just repeating you because of the button there. Mr. Kara, did you want to add?
Well, I think if we're not able to make a new motion, then it'd be very difficult to add amendments and stuff. So, because we don't even know who made, well, we probably could look it up, but we don't have it right here, the exact wording and who made the last motion and seconded it. But I think really the way it's written, I think it does allow us to make a new motion. My thoughts only.
I was not reading this agenda, so sorry, you're right. It's the topic, not the actual motion. This is similar to what we talked about with IKA many moons ago.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Jensen. Did you want to continue?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Haven't even started yet. I'll just say we got it right the first time. So there's the $200,000. When we voted the first time, I think the context of that vote was we have to get this money, we have to get this money. For those of us that were there, that was kind of the big pressing issue. Now we can just think, if that 200K wasn't on the table, would we really approve this without, I guess, any preferred amendments being exactly in place? To me, no, it's a bad agreement. It's not a good agreement. To the public, we really didn't, we got this definitely at the last minute, asked to approve it and said if we don't, we're going to lose about $193,000 in funding. Then you look through the agreement. This is just my personal opinion. It's a terrible agreement. I know it's been mentioned that we can drop out at any time, not according to the agreement. Saying that it's as simple as a friendly, like asking the Commissioner of Education, hey, can you sign this real quick and let us go? Oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. I mean, the idea of thinking that's just going to happen is just not realistic to me. We're going to have a new administration in a year from now, and maybe they'll appoint a commissioner that's just not going to do that. Also, to leave, we also have to get the approval of the board of directors, which means the other superintendents of the other districts. So the group that we're trying to leave, that may lose by us leaving the group, has to approve us leaving. And if they're going to lose by us leaving, does that give them any incentive to allow us to leave? And that's, of course, where you get the commissioner's approval as well. To me, that's just not a good safeguard. There's also the fact that there's no elected officials. We're creating a new level of government the day before we're asking citizens to vote on a very, very high budget that's going to affect them. And I want to say it's like $81 more for a $150,000 house, which isn't a huge amount, but consider the raises over the last 10 years or so, it's a lot. You can think of my own meme who lives in town and has to pay the taxes and stuff like that. And even for me, I live downtown. I pay rent. It goes into that. If property taxes go up, I pay into that too. So the idea of creating a level of government with literally no elected official oversight that could potentially levy assessments that we have to pay down the road, to me is just crazy. And a day before the budget vote, to go to voters and say, we're going to put this in place, not give you any safeguards, no elected accountability, and say, you can approve our really high budget, right, that we're really asking a lot for. I just can't do it. Going to the agreement itself, it's just, I don't think it's a good agreement. Personally, I like the idea of regionalization. I think there's a lot of money that could be saved, and if we do it right, I'm all on board. It's a good plan. It makes sense, saves money. But it has to be a good plan. to me, this is just not a good plan. What I would say, I know I spoke to a little bit about yourself, Mr. Chair, about this. I say let's amend this ourselves, make a version that we want, and tell the other districts, you guys pass this, amend this, adopt this one. I don't think we should adopt what they've adopted. I think we should make our own, say that we're still on board with doing this. We are involved, but you guys can make some changes too. Quite frankly, I think the other school boards, if they heard of some of our concerns too, they might be inclined to have some representation as well. Let's see, I think I've got most of my main points out. I mean, we got the vote right last time. Just the $200,000. Yeah, it's a lot of money. I mean, I get it. I work for a school district, so I know that the effect that has. But we just can't sell our soul for $200,000. And when you look at the agreement, it's not good at, in my opinion, of course, it's just not a good agreement. So I'm in favor of regionalizing some services and consolidating, but we have to have a good plan to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen, for that feedback. Certainly, we'll all take that into consideration. One of the things that you mentioned as well, I'll get to you in a minute, was the governing body, which you kind of touched upon. So I wanted to ask some information and details about that. On here, governing body number 8, paragraph A, if you want to take a look at it. The Regional Service Center shall be governed by a board of directors comprised of the superintendent of each school, of each member school administrative unit, or the superintendent's designee. I'm just going to pause there for a moment. I thought that was interesting, and it makes sense that it would be the superintendent, at least to start with, because you're dealing with each district. Who shall in all cases be an employee of that member's school administrative unit. The board of directors designees shall serve at the pleasure of the appointed superintendent. So I'm curious about how that's described. So if the superintendent decided to have a designee in his place, appointed by the superintendent, it says employee. Could it be a school board member besides, let's say, somebody else from your administrative team?
So a school board member meets the definition of employee. You all have a big paycheck from the district and get your W-2 form.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because Mr. Jensen did point out that he would prefer an elected official. So I was just wondering about that verbiage there. So thank you for that clarification as well. Anyway, I'm going to let that ponder. Ms. Parks?
Going back to my previous question, I had more questions. I just kind of got lost in that. In reading it, the concerns that I had previously and the concerns that I have now with the actual contract, under the administration number 10, it talks about managing the operating budget, including accounting and auditing requirements. It talks about maintaining liability and other insurance adequate to cover the regional service center. It talks about hiring employees to manage these positions, these tasks, and it says that the member administering the regional service center shall act as the fiscal agent. So my question is, how much is this potentially going to cost the Lewiston School District if we join this regionalization? What will we have to hire more staff to take care of these tasks administratively? I understand we're getting $200,000, but is that going to be a wash if we're hiring extra people and getting insurance for liability and all the other stuff? I just want to know where the balance is on that.
If you turn to the exhibit at the back, it lists the first year anticipated of the agreement. It lists the anticipated budget. In addition to Lewiston getting the $191,000 plus in additional subsidy, the state of Maine, in its wisdom, is also giving each service center $97,200, and you can see the breakout of that. So the district, and it's either going to be Auburn or Lewiston. Right now, if it's just the 3 districts, Auburn is going to be the fiscal agent. The $5,000 would more than cover. We're talking about, at this stage, 1 or 2 transactions a month for the first year. There'll be no employees. And before we decide, we have to decide on what services are going to be provided, if any, before discussing what, if any, insurance or audit is going to be required. I think the agreement anticipates an expansion over time where some of these things will indeed be necessary, but they will not be necessary initially.
So for the first year, who will be handling, will this be added to somebody, a current employee's workload to manage these things? Or?
So if Lewiston approves it, we would be the fiscal agent. And again, it would be probably handled by our grant accountant, just as when we have a grant. So that $97,200 would come in from the state, and those checks, if we hired a consultant to provide a training, for example, they'll be paid. But we do not anticipate that it's going to be a significant impact on staffing or productivity at all.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to express my concern, whether it's a valid concern or not. I would like to express my concern that a year from now we're going to have things on next year's budget that we have to approve additions to our budget in order to support this. That's what my concern would be.
Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple follow-up thoughts. Let's see. There's no. It does say that a designee could be appointed. There's still no guarantee that any elected official will be on there. There's no guarantee of that. And I mean, I think I want to say the first time the board. I mean, this was the last board. I know we talked about this in the fall. I remember that. I just don't remember at any point between then and when we were first presented with the agreement where we even asked if Lewiston wanted to administer this. So that to me kind of stands out. I do want to ask if this is approved and Lewiston does administer the funds, will they inflate the budget kind of like the Connors Elementary School does? Will they be included as part of the EPS model? So it means a higher budget that we'll have to present to voters.
So it would be separate. The only thing that would be in the local budget, and it's not going to be the case initially for sure, that would be if there were some assessment because of some program that was added in the future.
Would it affect the EPS model in a way that taxpayers may have to pay extra money for this?
The only impact on the EPS model as it's presently structured would be the additional subsidy that districts who participate receive. So that's roughly $200,000 this year, and under present law it would be $400,000 next year.
Okay. Let's see. So is it safe to say that we don't know exactly what the regional service center is even going to be doing a couple of years from now for sure?
Everything in the agreement is an example of what it could be, but until the regional service center is actually formed, it's just conjecture what it would be involved in.
That to me is pretty important. We're going into an agreement to form a group to decide what we want to do with the group later. I can't vote in favor of that. I think if we figure out things we could do, and I mean, I've brought up examples before, things that have been brought up as well. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just because you touched on it, I will add every 2 years, I believe, we're supposed to meet with the district across the river from us, Auburn. We haven't done that in a little while. That's been on my mind for a while, and since this topic has been brought up, I decided that probably in the near future we'll probably gather a meeting with them, because this is probably a topic that they want to discuss it as well. But I mean, there's probably other things as well, and this is part of being a service center. That's why it's in our laws to do that. So just anyway, I just wanted to mention that because we're getting to that point where we need to talk to the other side as well. And I don't know if they're ready either, but at some point that is planned in my notes for part of a workshop that we're planning on too. Mr. Webster, you had something that you wanted to say?
Yes, a few things. I work for you, the Lewiston School Committee. I have no interest in having this service center get involved in anything that you are not interested in supportive of. So I'm more than happy to represent to you tonight that we will not do anything without my coming to report to the board, and if you wanted to voice your displeasure, but I don't think that will be the case. The other thing I wanted to mention is if it is approved tonight, the City Council is meeting tomorrow to set the June 12th election date, and when this meeting is over, I'm going to be contacting Ed Barrett to let him know. The way the law is read, and this relates to what the chair said earlier, is that until the Regional Service Center is formed, it requires, in the case of Auburn and Lewiston as municipal districts, voter approval. Once a Regional Service Center is formed, a school committee that's not presently in a Regional Service Center could then vote to enter one. It's a little convoluted, but that's the way the law is being interpreted by DOE. But to form a Regional Service Center, a new one, if, for example, Lewiston wanted to go on its own and come up with its own agreement, there would have to be a second partner, another district, and then that would go to voters. If a Regional Service Center already existed, then this board at a later date could vote to join it. Presently, the Great Falls Regional Service Center with Auburn, Poland, and Levitt are moving forward, and then there's also a vote that will involve Lisbon and Sabattis. I don't believe there are any districts, local districts, that would be available to partner with outside of those in an existing agreement.
Ms. Hutchinson.
I would like a point of clarification here. When I voted against the Regional Service Center before, it had nothing to do with $200,000. It had to do with the CDS and the 3 to 5 year olds. And I don't want it assumed that we're doing this just for the money. I want to do what's best for our students. The money plays no role in my decision, and for people to assume that is really sad when they haven't contacted DOE themselves and gotten information for themselves. Thank you.
All right. I wanted to add on the vote, not our vote, but this is actually would go out, and if we voted today, it would go to the June election.
June 12th.
June 12th election. And in my opinion, whether I'm in favor or not in the past or today, it's going to the voters, and they can certainly decide. As long as we move forward with this, I'm okay with the money coming forward to help us with the budget, because what I'm most concerned is what happens tomorrow. Budget is always interesting. This year's different than the years I've been involved, that's for sure. And if we have to come back to this board and reevaluate the entire budget because the voters voted it down tomorrow, I see this as possibly a little bit to help. And to me, that's helping students, at least in that perspective. To also a little clarification, I think we certainly, I did as well, among other things, got clouded by the big CDS issue. I'm not even going to say it's an issue, it's just, it was a thing. And I think that clouded what this regional service center was for a while. And now that's out of the picture, so we don't need to even consider that. The other thing Mr. Webster just briefly mentioned is he's our employee. And part of his job is to do the budget, to make recommendations to us, to look at what's available to us by whatever means to make this school budget and to make the district operate effectively. So I respect that, and I thank him for all the work he puts into it. Sometimes that comes across as, well, he's pushing us to do this. You know, at the same time, I get that. And sometimes I have to listen and say, well, what if it was the reverse? If you didn't tell us, then we'd be after him for not telling us as well. So I kind of see both sides of the coin in certain aspects. But for me, at this point, I'm just going to be in favor of it because I want the citizens to vote on it. Now, doesn't mean that we don't add an amendment, as Mr. Jensen mentioned. We can certainly do that. We can make some changes. And I don't think we need to make them tonight, just to let you know. I think that would be a lengthy process. I think we should send it to a subcommittee for review if that's what we want to do. It could, I'm just throwing it out there, it could be administrative subcommittee, maybe the student engagement committee. I'm not sure which one. We'd have to, as a board, decide where to send that, just to review the information and make recommendations, to come back and make recommendations to this board. And we can certainly vote on that the way the motion is currently tonight, with the stipulation or the amendment that we would have a review. Would that make sense, Mr. Webster?
That is certainly an option. I think that almost if anything passes tonight to enter an agreement, I think that we should be doing ongoing reviews and reports so this board is fully informed and partners along the way with whatever happens.
Makes sense. So I will pause for a moment and let Mr. Kerr speak.
So I'm quite impressed with Luke's presentation because it made me even start thinking a little bit. I'm not there yet, but I no, I won't. Not at this point. But anyway, your information is, I think, valid, or your concerns are valid. I also think Ms. Park's concern that this becomes a budgetary issue next year for us. I don't believe it will happen, but there are no guarantees. So I'm not sure if anyone else is thinking subcommittee. I truly think a couple of small motions. Is there a motion, Megan, that would put you at a level where you could be supportive of this?
Number 24 says that the agreement contains the entire agreement and there's no swaying on it. That alone tells me that we can get reports and he can come back to us and tell us everything that he wants, but if we have no say in changing it, it doesn't really matter what he reports back to us. If we agree to this, we're already bound to it with very little say. That's what I think.
I truly think it, I don't know how the board feels, but I wouldn't mind sending it to a subcommittee. However, I was just thinking out of the box, and of course this is fresh in my mind. Subcommittees here is very new, 5 months or less, right? So we're still adjusting to that as well. But it's not out of the question that next year maybe we create a subcommittee just to keep an eye and discuss how this is moving forward. So that's just a thought right now. I'm not gonna say, I'm just putting that in there as a little birdie chirping on your shoulder. I'm just thinking. So anyway, but in the meantime, we have a motion on the table to receive and vote on a motion to enter into the regional service agreement. We have a motion by Mr. Kerr and a second by Ms. Roy. Is there further discussion before I bring it to the public? Ms. Hutchinson.
I would like to ask that we amend the motion to put in that a school committee member from each of the districts involved would be serving on that board of directors to guarantee an elected oversight.
I think we can't make the amendment until we vote on this first, and then another motion would have to be made. Is that correct?
Once we vote on it, there won't be any amendments to it.
Well, there's some discussion going around the table here, so.
There'd be a vote on the amendment, and then if approved, then there'd be a vote on the revised motion. If the amendment's not approved, then there'd be the motion. Yes.
There's some discussion going around the
But
table.
we don't have the power to amend the contract. The contract doesn't
That's-
state that.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting before Ms. Hutchinson made her suggestion is that we send this to a subcommittee to review and then come back to the school board, but that's not the motion at the table.
So this was, let me just, this was the motion that was considered last time. Motion to enter the Regional Service Center agreement with the understanding that the Lewiston Public Schools will not continue membership beyond the first year, should the agreement not be amended to place a Lewiston School Committee member on the Regional Service Center Board.
Oh, hang on 1 second. There was some other hands over here. Miss Quartermash? Okay, so you're set. Miss Roy, you're set as well? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Jensen. Thank you for your patience.
I'm just thinking, if we, I'm not so sure if we can amend it.
We're not amending, yes.
What are we amending?
We're making a motion that says, yeah, things are. Right, we're not changing the contract. We're saying we're gonna agree to enter into an agreement for the Regional Service Center if they change this contract, basically, is what it's gonna say, or something to that effect, right, Bill?
So if the motion that was considered last time is adopted, once the Regional Service Center is formed with 2 or more members as of July 1, and assuming one of those members is Lewiston, I would work with the other member or members of the board to amend the agreement to place a Lewiston School Committee member on the board. If that did not happen, this board has already acted to saying its participation would not go beyond the next fiscal year, and there is no assessment for the next fiscal year, so there'll be no additional financial cost other than the loss of state subsidy.
Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just not so sure that if we make a stipulation that says if it's not amended in the year, we can leave. We've already signed the contract. I don't think we can just leave. Legally, I'm not quite sure that we're allowed to, you know. Kind of like if Constitution is being passed in New Jersey, says, okay, we'll pass this, but if it's not amended this way in a year, then we're backing out. Like, I don't think you can do that.
Ms. Parks.
I feel like the approach is kind of backwards, entering into an agreement, not knowing all the details, and then hoping to change it after the fact. If there's only 3 other people on this committee, couldn't you simply email them or call them and say, can we amend this contract? And then once the contract is amended to what we all agree on, then we could vote on whether or not we want to join it? It seems like that would be the correct way to do it, not getting into something before we have all the details.
The other 3 school districts have already approved the agreement, and you know, when this was rejected by this board, you know, I backed off, and they've proceeded forward. There's, in my discussions with them, there's openness to considering any and all changes. Keep in mind that this is the first time any such agreement like this has been drafted, and this has been this was done by the attorneys, and I think that had we received this earlier, but it wasn't even made available to me until March, I think, you know, we're learning from the concerns that have been expressed, and I have no doubt that the agreement can and will be changed if that is the desire of this board, if you do enter into it. But the agreement has already been approved, and I think changes at this point would take place after the service center is actually formed. To give you an example, I think it's SAD 52, although maybe RSU 16. Because they're an RSU, it only needs to go to voters in their budget meeting, district budget meeting, and that's taking place this Thursday. So there's not going to be any changes in the agreement at this point. But once formed, come July 1, operational, you vote, I pledge that this will be the first thing on the agenda.
Further discussion? We can certainly vote with the motion on table, but my suggestion, if someone would like to make the motion, is to send this to a subcommittee for review and then come back to the school board. But that's my suggestion only. I just want to check with our parliamentarian with what's currently on the table, and if someone wants to make an amendment. So we have a motion currently on the table, and it is for what is read here. To receive a vote on a motion to enter into a regional service center agreement. But if we want to amend it now, we'd have to vote on this and then add the amendment, right?
Main motions may be amended. Votes on amendments must be taken before the original motion is voted upon.
So this is the original motion, right?
Is that the same motion as April 2nd?
No.
No. Okay. And that was moved by Mr. Kerr.
So my question is basically, can we add an amendment to this currently, or do we have to vote on it and then change it?
You can add an amendment.
You can what?
You can add.
Oh, okay, we can add. All right. Very good. Thank you. That's all. Yep, it is a loop-de-loop, that's for sure. That's why I want some double clarification. All right. So, Mr. Kerr.
Just a quick question for the superintendent on the subcommittee idea. I mean, that would still keep us out of it for a little bit, but we'd be working towards that direction. So do you have any response to that?
So if it is referred to a subcommittee, then we will, the city council would not meet tomorrow to set the vote. It would no longer go to voters. And we would, at the appropriate time, once the regional service center, assuming it's approved by at least 2 other districts, we could petition them for membership come July 1. At that point, it would just be a school committee decision. We would not be in the same position as we would be if we were, in effect, a founding member.
If I could continue.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, there have been some strong points against this, and we're kind of divided on this. And I just think we can, if we can do a little work to this, and it would give, I don't know, I just think there's just too many people against this right now where I think we're divided, and I'm just not sure. I think there's another route to get to this. It's just going to take 6 months or so that way. I'm willing to pull my motion. I think at this point, I think listening to the divided committee.
Can he pull his motion at this point? Okay. Further discussion while that's being researched?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Miss.
I'm for it. I see that there's a lot of potential there. I have faith in Mr. Webster that he will keep us informed. I hope, I think he'd keep us involved with the process. I think he wants to do what we want him to do, if that makes any sense, but I'm for it, so that's all I really want to say.
Like I said earlier, I'm for this, whether it's now or later. I think it'll all work its way out, and even if voters are against it, they'll certainly vote, and we'll move to improve it at that, even more so later on. So whether it's now or later, even the board of directors, whoever that might be, whether it's the superintendents, which I believe will happen in the beginning, if they decide to add, they may even decide to add a school board member from each district, or appoint one for that matter. I think it's all about working and cooperating together with all the committees that are around us, but not just us. There are other school districts that are doing this all over the state. Ms. Hutchinson had her hand up, and then, oh, I'm going to pause you for a moment because she was researching.
Yes. So before a vote on a main motion is taken, business may be interrupted to blah, 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 withdraw a motion if that is the will of committee member Care.
All right. So before, I'm going to let him ponder on that because it looks like he's pondering. I'm going to go to Ms. Hutchinson.
So am I clear, if we do not vote tonight, and Auburn, Poland, or SAD 52 vote to enter into it, then we can join later with no public vote, which means we are taking the vote of the people away from them by delaying it.
It is correct that a delay would eliminate the need for the legally required public vote.
Ms. Parks?
I would like to point out that even if we voted to approve this tonight and it went to the public vote, if the Lewiston voters were able to voice their opinion and voted against it, but 2 of the other 3 districts voted for it, we would be in it regardless. So their voice wouldn't be heard either way, because it says it only requires the approval of 2 of the 4 districts. So they wouldn't have a say either way.
Just to be clear, if 2 or 3 other districts vote in the affirmative, but Lewiston were to go to voters and Lewiston voters voted against it, the Regional Service Center would be formed, but Lewiston would not be a member.
Any other discussion before I go back to Mr. Care?
Yeah, we'll leave it on the table and go for the vote. I just think, you know, you may be right, it should go to a subcommittee, but.
All right. Actually, before I go on, discussion from the public. Those sitting in the seat. Ms. Roman.
As a service that operates within the school, yes, my budget is separate from the general fund, but there is benefits to working with other districts with the nutrition program. It gives us buying power. We already have a huge buying power, but it adds to that, and it gives us a better ability to work with vendors and professional development. Is definitely something that we're always struggling to find funding for. So by having multiple districts joining, we're able to bring in better people to professionally train. So I know nutrition is it's something that I would advocate for.
There she's talking about food again. Don't forget your tray over here. Okay. Ms. Roy?
So this is, as Mr. Care stated, there's a lot of good points that have been discussed tonight, and hopefully people are listening to the discussion, are reading about this and seeing what other districts are doing. I personally think that I would like to hear the voice of the voter for this something this big. I have confidence in representing my ward, but I very much feel strongly that the voice of the voter needs to be heard. That's why I would be supportive of it.
I think Mr. Care, and I only mention his name because he mentions it to me, like how much fun it is to work around this table and to have a vetting debate or whatever you want to call it. I don't even like the word debate because it's really a cooperation of working together and having this discussion. And so I really appreciate every voice here at the table tonight. And Ms. Hutchinson, looks like you had something there. But before I go to you, I didn't finish. Was there anybody else in the public? Okay, so back to you, Ms. Hutchinson.
So again, I make the motion, the amendment that we guarantee that there's a school committee rep on the board of directors.
All right, is there oh, yeah.
I just like clarification. It can be done in the context of the type of motion that was considered on April 2nd. Is that what you're referring to?
I was thinking more along the lines of a friendly amendment to Mr. Gayer's motion that we received.
So the only reason I say that is the agreement is already fixed for the July 1 operational date. It can be changed after that. But so I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't confusion that if that motion were adopted, that this agreement would be immediately changed. So the motion that was approved, excuse me, that was considered last time, again read that to enter into the regional service center agreement with the understanding Lewiston Public Schools would not continue membership beyond the first year should the agreement not be amended to place a Lewiston School Committee member on the regional service center board.
So I would agree to that as a friendly amendment as long as Roy was okay with that.
All right, so we have a first and a second to the amendment. Okay, I think we're good. Mr. Jensen, oh, but before I add, sorry, I keep interrupting. Are you all set? You read that? You got all? Okay, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt too much. Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to what Ms. Parks was discussing a few moments ago, I think she was under section 25, approval conditions, effective date members, under subsection B. The way I'm reading this is that even if two members do form it and it is a group, if Lewiston wants to join by November 30th of this year, we still would have to be approved. It's approved by the voters of at least two members before June 30th of this year. The Regional Service Center shall be formed with an effective date of July 1st, 2018. The effective date provided that any other party to this agreement, aka Lewiston, may then join the Regional Service Center as a member if this agreement is approved by the voters of that party by November 30, 2018. So we would have until then to vote. So this isn't taking away a vote from the people of Lewiston, although I will say that opposition to this agreement does not equate to me trying to take away a vote from Lewiston people. Yeah, and just as a side note, I'd be kind of curious to see what some of the folks in the other towns around here do and see if they're on board with such an agreement. Because if it comes to a vote and the other towns all shoot it down, I mean, where are we going to be? That is a possibility.
Could you read the full thing? I always like to do that before going to a vote, to read the full description.
Yes, I can.
As soon as you get to it.
Motion to enter into the Regional Service Center agreement with the understanding Lewiston Public Schools will not continue membership beyond this first year should the agreement not be amended to place a Lewiston School Committee member on the Regional Service Center board.
Very good. And I would hope that the other districts would follow suit and add one of their school board members on there as well.
Yes, in fact, and I can't remember which board member mentioned it, but I like the idea of there being a superintendent and a school committee member from each district. And I think that provides both the operational experience and also the public input with the school community. I think that's a great idea.
Maybe we should make that amendment clearer that way. No, we can't do it for them now. Never mind. No, never mind. All right, so let's go to a vote. Those in favor. Those against? It's a 6-3 vote. Motion passes. All right. Moving ahead To receive and approve amendments to the 2018 and 2019 school calendar. Superintendent Bill Webster will present.
Yes, thank you. In the memo that's in your packet, there are two suggested revisions to be considered for reflection on the school calendar. One is changing the October 1st parent-teacher conference at Lewiston High School from all grades to freshmen only. When we went back and looked at parent participation, it just drops off so significantly after freshman year. It just didn't seem to be an effective use of time to not make this change. The other thing, as I've been thinking about the vote tomorrow, it occurred to me that we've got a big election next November 6th, and based on what has transpired not only in our schools but in schools across the country, trying to not have schools be voting places, and to the extent they must be, trying not to have school on those dates. So I've conferred with both principals at Montello and Longley, and they are in agreement that they would be pleased to move their parent-teacher conferences from what the board had approved to November 6th. And so, to use the old expression, killing two birds with one stone. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've said at a few meetings, at least two, that I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we vote in public schools and how much safety we put into them to just, let's pause that for a day. So kudos to whoever, I don't know if it's yourself, Mr. Webster, whoever came up with this plan. I'm ecstatic about it. I like to see something like this done every year. Great job.
Is that a motion?
It was motion to receive and approve amendments to the 2018-2019 school calendar.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Jensen, a second by Ms. Estabrook. Any further discussion? Those in the public? All right, a vote from the board. Those in favor? Looks to be unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Moving ahead. To receive and approve revisions to the remaining 2018 meeting dates for the Lewiston School Committee. Superintendent Bill Webster will present.
So, in looking at it, I already can see one error on this sheet. The May 21st meeting was not intended to have a workshop, so my apologies to that to Ms. Hutchison. But this board has discussed about how it would be beneficial to have a little more time and have workshops on topics, not unlike what the City Council often does with a workshop at 6 and the regular meeting at 7. So under this proposal, and again, there was that mistake on May 21st, but after that, regular meetings that do not have subcommittee meetings under this proposal through the end of November would have a workshop. And we would want to solicit ideas for those workshops. One of them has already come up, and that's on student discipline and behaviors. So that's in the works. We haven't fully hashed out the actual time when that would take place. So bringing this to you for your consideration. And the other thing, there are a couple other changes on here. And some of this was in error on the last schedule you got. The prior list, you had a meeting on June 18th. We've always had it at the end of the month for personnel only. And the reason for that is we're hiring a lot of new staff for the coming year, and so having it later in the month allows us to finalize those employment decisions at that point. And then we have always had one meeting in July, not two, and that's in the middle of July on the 16th. And also just point out that in August we have a regular meeting, and then there is a personnel only meeting on August 27th. That is right when staff is coming back to school, with students starting on the 29th this year. And so it's usually a short meeting just to firm up those last minute hires, because we often have people that we're making offers to over that weekend.
And also, so I discussed this with Mr. Webster, but then I also realized there were a few items that I wanted to add to the fall, which included possibly touring the Connors property, or more so the fields that are going to be opening up right in August. Be nice for us to walk around the grounds at the very least and get a little excited to see how it's all working together. And also, it was mentioned about visiting Martell as well, so to see how that facility is, so that we can make a determination on what we want to do as a school district, whether we want to keep it or pass it on to the city possibly. A few suggestions. If I may. Yep.
So those 2 points, I'm going to be corresponding with Jason Fuller, our athletic director, who is planning the opening ceremony for the fields, which will be turned over to the city sometime in the middle of August. And I'll make sure that the school committee is invited to that. Doesn't have to be part of a meeting, but I think it's important that you all get formal invitations to that. And then in terms of Martell, we had, and I don't know, maybe, do you want to report on it, since you're chair of the facility subcommittee, about that meeting at Martell?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Something that's also, I mean, and some of those things, to visit the field or tour school, might not be a regular meeting, so we might not need to put it in here, but it might be convenient because we're already meeting and so forth. So we'll determine that as we discuss it further. And then another thing that I was reminded of is the spaghetti supper, or whatever you want to call it, that we decided to not have like in the winter. It was like probably the community forum, like spaghetti supper. So we need to figure that out and add that on, because we had approved on moving that to the fall after we had time to get cozy in our seats, which I think we are. So it's time to do that as well. So we can certainly discuss this some more and maybe even make a recommendation, but I just wanted to let you all know that we were working on it, including the workshops, which I think Mr. Kerr had brought up the idea, which we certainly think is a good idea. And some of these workshops I'm already working on and putting together, but I mean, I don't have a workshop for December yet, so these will certainly evolve. And if we don't have a workshop, we'll certainly use it for something else. Miss Ray?
Thank you. One suggestion would be to reflect the city council schedule over the summer as well. We won't be meeting on July 17th as proposed. We've moved that. So, but the August 13th lines up with the city council meeting on August 14th as well. So that July 16th one, I would personally be open to amending to match up more with the city schedule, because I anticipate a lot of staff over there will be taking vacations during the week of the 17th, but that's just a personal trying to do both sort of thing.
Mr. Jensen.
Mr. Rass. Sorry, I was on the wrong screen here. I move we receive and approve revisions to the remaining 2018 meeting dates for the Lewiston School Committee.
So we have a motion by Mr. Jensen and a second by Mr. Kerr to receive and approve revisions to the remaining 2018 meetings dates for the Lewiston School Committee. Further discussion? Anything from the public? Tina?
Just want to clarify, the 21st, there will be no workshop. I don't have to cut my subcommittee shorter.
No workshop. That was a typo.
Yes, we'll certainly come back with further details on this report. Plus, we got beyond December as well. So, further discussion? Okay, those in favor? It's unanimous. Just put my pen up. If you like Luke. Yeah. Moving forward. To receive a report from the District Wellness Committee, committee member Tina Hutchinson will present.
Well, sort of. In your packet, you have a survey that was presented by the Wellness Committee. Since this was done before I joined the committee, we have Alyssa and Christine who are here to go over it, and they'll explain what the survey is all about and answer any of your questions.
Good evening again. So we have a very small but mighty district wellness committee. We have a wellness policy currently as the school district that adheres to all the regulations that nutrition needs to meet any funding. So what happens is the school district's required to have a policy on wellness. And if we don't adhere to having certain criteria approved by the federal government, the nutrition program is the one that receives fines from not obeying by this. So we are in compliance currently with our wellness policy. However, part of the district wellness committee is to look beyond nutrition's regulations, but also what the school district wants. So whether it be nutrition right now, I could serve diet soda in the schools, and nutrition regulations would allow it. But as a wellness policy and district, we have decided we do not want soda in the schools offered to our students. So that's where we control some of those additional things. So one of the things that we met, our district policy, our district committee right now is made up, we have Tina, we have Chrissy here from Healthy Androscoggin, myself from the nutrition director, anyone else I can recruit, various teachers that we can find when we are able to meet, and we're always looking for more members. I'm going to just repeat that all the time. Bobby doesn't know this yet, but I'm totally going to recruit her too because Elaine used to do it, so why not? The more the merrier. So one of the things that we did do is a survey, and Chrissy helped facilitate some of that. So.
Yeah. I'll say so. Like Alyssa said, I'm Chrissy. I work at Healthy Androscoggin as a health promotion coordinator. I work with a lot of school districts in Androscoggin County to try to provide resources and tools for school districts to implement, school-based wellness activities and best practices. And so, working with Alyssa and other members of the District Wellness Committee, it has been really difficult to get a representation from all schools to come. We find that it's a scheduling conflict mostly, but what we would like ideally is to have representation from all schools so that we can have a unified effort at school wellness and sort of be better at sharing resources and activities to empower more school staff to do wellness best practices. It's been about a year in the making, this survey. So we developed the survey to kind of see where the school district is at right now. And I don't think I mentioned earlier, but part of my health promotion activities is to disseminate the 5210 Let's Go program. Show of hands, has anyone heard of that before? That's great. It's a Maine-based program, and it does exactly that. It helps schools achieve a better wellness environment for students and staff. So they have surveys that they disseminate every year to people in school buildings who participate and deliver the program with me. And a lot of these questions came from that survey just to kind of provide some consistency. And I thought the results were actually quite great, given that we don't have, or that we struggle with getting representation from all schools. There's a lot of good things happening if you read through the report. I'd say our biggest gap is that people just don't even know that there is a wellness policy. And so I think getting that message out would be really helpful. And I think part of that is having representation from every school, empowered to come to district wellness committee meetings.
And also having Tina on the committee has been really helpful. What we lack is a voice. What I find happening is that many schools on their learning days, on those early release days, they do have groups that get together. They are looking at wellness. And so wellness encompasses not only the students' well-being, but also the staff. So we do hear about really cool things the staff's doing to support wellness in their schools. The problem is does that translate up to a district oversight? And there isn't completely. So it's making sure, part of the survey was like, where do people think we're at? What can we do better? There's always room for improvement. I hear across the river in Auburn, it's full house when they have a wellness committee. I'm lucky if I could have it in my office with 3 or 4 people. So for me, it's growing that. I know there's plenty of caring individuals and community members that are highly interested in this. Whether it's the staff appreciation all the way to students and what they eat at home as well as at school, or the activities that they have available for them.
I just have a question. So I think when we think wellness, especially since you are the head of this, that we're just talking food. What other things are you guys discussing when it comes to wellness?
One of the biggest things, and I'm slowly working on, is there are rules in place as far as rewards for students, non-food rewards in particular. And that goes against everything that I was ever raised in a school. Like, we did good, you had a pizza party, or you know, you had someone's birthday and everyone brought in whatever. And so we're finding that working with administrations, and it could be as simple as that if a child read 12 books, they got a Snickers. It even stretches down to PTOs, PTAs, when they give a jar of candy to say thank the teacher, and where does the teacher put it? On the corner of their desk. So that's food rewards, non-food rewards. And then we talk about activity-based. Some of the things, the 5210, there is a conference that they have. It's awesome. If anyone ever gets to go, the more the merrier. It's free.
It's free to anybody associated with schools. So even if you're a parent, you qualify. It's free. It's a Friday in Portland. It's usually the 3rd Friday in October.
It's by the museum, so you can go see some art afterwards. It's good.
There's another one in Bangor on the Thursday before, but there's always a really empowering guest speaker, and there's a lot of energy because everyone's coming from across the state to learn about improving school wellness.
And they talk about physical education. So while I do the nutrition, it's also working with curriculum and like, do we have that physical education piece, or kids up and moving? So one of the things during the conference, they would just stop the whole conference and be like, everybody up. And they'd make everyone in the room stand up, and you're doing something physical. As adults, we're doing that. And so taking those techniques and bringing them into the classroom, because not all kids learn sitting down. So it's that wellness as far as not only getting the food in and making sure we have the right food, but it's also, are we giving the right activities to keep children motivated for different learning environments, getting them in the classroom up and down. I know we have different seating arrangements in a lot of our classrooms, so we're doing a fair amount of this already, which is pretty awesome, but it's continuing that. Looking at some goals, you know, as a district, where do we want to go? And it could be as simple as like, you know, the Gator Challenge, you know, that's something we can easily get behind. Like, what else can we get behind that supports that kind of district wellness? Encouraging more water, so having those water fountains where the bottles go in. I mean, that's just all really awesome stuff. Chrissy has shown up to some barbecues with her how much sugars and things, right? Which is not always popular at a barbecue, but it's something that's kind of good. So having team groups come in. St. Mary's Nutrition Center is doing gardening. So, you know, how do we encompass that gardening piece into it? I mean, a lot of it can be food related, but it's that physical education. It's curriculum based through the nurses, through education, through SNAP Ed. What are they doing? So all of that is that whole big wellness picture.
It's a really big picture, and part of our goal, just to restate it, is to share all of those resources Alyssa just listed that some schools are using here and there, but not necessarily across the board. And so we just want to make sure that all schools have equal access to those things and are aware. And we feel that the best way to do that is to get representation from each school to meet and talk about those things and share them, whether it be monthly or quarterly or whatever works. But we could really use your help in getting people to come and motivate them and you know, make it a positive experience for them to come.
We do have the YCC, so the youth from St. Mary's. They are, what is their full name?
Youth Campaign Crew?
Youth Campaign Crew. They are made up of students. I think they're speaking at one of your upcoming meetings, and I'm really excited. So this is a group of students I've worked with for 3 or 4 years. They are brutally honest. I love them. They will ask me questions like, do we add additives to food? They'll ask, why do I have a spork? Why do I have a fork? Why do I have this? I mean, they're awesome groups of kids, but they get up and they do taste tests in the schools. They're concerned about how students are sitting at tables. I know they've approached Jake about mixing up diversity. So not all the sports people sit at this table, but can we number kids off for a difference to meet different friends for a day? And so having that student involvement too is crucial to that wellness committee, as well as staff, the whole community.
I know we're kind of chit-chatting sometimes because we're excited about what you're hearing. But Ms. Hutchinson had something.
Alyssa kind of touched on it on the May 21st meeting. I believe it's slated for the YCC to be here to present to us. We didn't want to do both this and their presentation in the same day because we don't want to detract from the kids because they work really hard at what they're going to present to us and what they do in their everyday lives. So that's what the plan is.
Further discussion? I just want to add to that son that I was talking about with calories. Tomorrow is his birthday, and he loves Oreos. I mean, that's like, you show him an Oreo or an Oreo shake, anything that had to do with Oreos, it's like willpower, forget it. However, the fitness part of it is amazing for him as well. He knows, oh, I had 800 calories, I got to burn that off somehow. He has a watch, you know, that he can keep track of his calories, and he works for it. I mean, he really does. So it's amazing that I know all our kids here are pretty unique in their own way, but I feel so guilty for eating certain foods because I'm watching him counting calories and watching what he's eating so well. So it was an influence from the school that made a difference. So thank you for being involved in the way that you are, and he's certainly paying attention. So there's one student that you're making a big strides on, so kudos to you guys. Further discussion?
To your comment that if you look at the back of the survey under some of the professional development opportunities that teachers requested, one of the higher scoring ones was about how to incorporate more physical activity into the school day. And that's definitely a huge challenge. I recognize a lot of the limitations. I'm a Lewiston resident, and I love to walk and bike everywhere. Maybe you've seen me around walking or biking, but I see safe routes to schools and walking school buses as a great opportunity. We have such a fantastic grid system, and so just want to let you know that I support those initiatives, and if you need any help, Healthy Androscoggin is right down the street there, and we can help.
And I know it's different for every school, literally, grade schools, middle school, high school, different age groups. I think recently Geiger, was it this week with the bike? Wednesday, so they're biking from Pettingill Park to the school. There's no sidewalks to Geiger, maybe someday, but it's more of a driving school or a busing school, and they do this a few times a year. So glad they participate. Not everybody can because of certain requirements, just as much as walking and other things, but it's fun to see not just Geiger, but other schools participating in the different activities that they do. So thank you for your involvement in pursuing that. Any further discussion? All right, well, thank you again for your presentation. We appreciate your patience and your time to be here this evening. All right. Not forgetting the tray. Thank you. All right, we'll move forward to receiving reports from our subcommittees. We'll begin with our facilities subcommittee. School committee member Luke Jensen will present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. See, to go through it quickly, the planning board is going to be discussing the parking lot at LHS, everything going on with that. It's going to be at a meeting on Monday, and I believe they meet at 5:30. 5:30 at City Hall. I'm not sure if they're in the conference room or the chambers, but not a huge City Hall. You can find them. I'm going to try and be there. I'm about 50-50 sure if I can. Any other board members, I'm sure the support will be appreciated. Let's see. There's going to be a visual performing arts building meeting here in the Dingley building on Wednesday, May 23rd at 4:30 p.m. So those involved certainly encourage you to show up and of course participate as always. We have a pretty good group involved in that, so very excited. Let's see. Also, our facilities director, Louis Turcott, shared that the department started a new quality control program. We go through Hilliard for getting supplies, and they actually provided this free of charge. This is entirely free, which is really cool. Essentially giving these new cards that'll list like what assignments need to be done, like for cleaning in a particular room, like a bathroom, hallway, elevator, kind of lists everything that needs to be done, supplies that would be needed. It's really future thinking. It's doing it in a smart way. You can pretty much put analytics to almost anything these days. So this is just a smart way of doing it. And free of charge too, which is awesome. We're currently doing a test trial at Longley Elementary. I want to give credit to Ray Roy, who's leading the efforts on that. So that's pretty cool, to essentially using the data to be even more efficient. So I thought that was really cool. Also, as our superintendent alluded to earlier, we do have plans for the Martell Elementary School building. I guess right now we want to do, for our subcommittee, is to do a walkthrough, probably sometime in September or so, in the fall. The plan is we'll do a walkthrough, decide on a recommendation, and then we'll take that recommendation to the full board here. We'll consider it as a full board, decide what we want to do, and then if we can essentially decide to keep it, repurpose it for something else, or we can give it back to the city, and then they will probably sell it to someone because it's a pretty good location. So that's the plan for Martell Elementary School. A lot of time between the walkthrough, so if any comments, thoughts, feel free to share them my way, Mr. Webster's way, any thoughts that you guys have. I think there's just one other thing. Oh, right. Before the end of this school year, Superintendent Webster will likely form either one or two furniture and technology, essentially furniture and technology committee or committees for the Connors Elementary School. It's going to be made up of teachers, people that work in schools, people that know the buildings, know exactly what they need. It's going to be an administrative subcommittee, not one that we need to jump right into, because I know we have enough work as is. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that as well. And that is my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Jensen. Were there any questions or comments from the board for Mr. Jensen? Any direction for his committee? Ms. Parks?
If and when the committees form for the furniture, I know you said there'll be teachers involved, but I would recommend having, I know we have a couple OTs in the district, having them involved, because that would be really helpful to a lot of our students.
Any further discussion? Anything from our administrator, since we have lost our audience? Nope. All right. Moving forward. School committee member Mark Mayer will present on negotiations. Sorry, I guess. I like that Mayer. Maybe future ideas. Mr. Mark Kerr.
So Tanya and Monique can chime in at any point, but negotiations I think are going really well right now. We've hit on a couple of tough subjects, and we're getting there. I think both sides are at the table openly, and I suspect we've got another half dozen maybe meetings, maybe less, but I think we're well on our way.
Anything from the board? All right, thank you. Moving forward. Student Engagement Subcommittee, School Committee member Megan, I can't think of a funny one for this one, but Parks will present.
Thanks. Tonight we discussed, we established the definition of student engagement. We had determined at the last meeting that the goals, the district goals that pertained to this committee before we could really address them, we needed an actual definition for student engagement. So we established the definition as student engagement is the tendency to be behaviorally, emotionally, and cognitively involved in academic activities. And we began discussion on the new goal, number 10, that was added by the administrative committee at the last meeting. And we started we created a chart, which I can't seem to locate right now, for resources in schools for what we're already doing to address poverty in our district. And our goal is to try to talk that out a little bit at the next meeting and figure out the best way to determine what holes, what gaps we have in that, so that we can figure out better ways to address poverty in our district. And I think that's it, unless Renee would like to add anything?
The only thing I would add is that document that we kind of created today of things that are already happening in schools and related to poverty. We're going to share that among the board, because my guess is that some of us probably don't know everything that's happening in different schools. So it was an eye-opener for me. So.
Anything further? Discussion or comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Thank you all for the work you put into the subcommittees. Really appreciate the time and effort. Moving forward to the report from City Council Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As was the will of this committee tonight, we will be voting tomorrow, or having a special meeting for the approval of the election warrant for June 12th. We'll also be hearing a presentation by Raise Up Housing Cooperative, who the City Council decided to award the Spirit of America Award to. They're doing some really great work in the community, and so we want to have everyone hear more about that. And then, I don't know what this will be, but discussion of the taxi cab zone charging system. TBD on that. The other thing I wanted to give information on, that was given at the City Council last week, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance to hear it. Secretary of State Matthew Dunlap will be making stops across the state during the month of May to provide information to voters regarding the new ranked choice voting method that will be used in the June 12th primary elections. He'll be in Lewiston on Tuesday, May 29th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Lewiston Public Library at 200 Lisbon Street. For those who aren't able to make it to that date, he will also be doing a Facebook Live on Thursday, May 24th at 6 p.m. on the Maine Department of the Secretary of State Facebook page. So there's a lot of, information being thrown out there about how this June 12th primary election is going to go, but you can get the information straight from the source from Secretary Dunlap, and there's a lot of resources on the RCV resources page as well.
Any questions, comments, or to Ms. Ray? Thank you for the thorough report. Really appreciate your time. You've been very busy lately. A little bit. Report from the school committee chair. My time. Okay, so I do have a list of things here, so you'll have to be patient with me. All right, so I want to talk about each subcommittee, and I'll certainly send out an email to the chairs, but between discussion between me and Mr. Webster, we thought it would be a good idea to get the subcommittees to review their mission statements, the current goals and objectives, and to send me the results, in which I'll review and put them together for a future workshop or meeting for all of us to work out together. And at this meeting, we could all discuss these questions and goals and missions and objectives. Mr. Jensen kind of triggered this thought process recently because he talked about us all working together, and the subcommittees certainly work in, like, we can certainly send something to the subcommittee and work on it, but I thought by looking at the mission statements and goals, we could see what the top priorities are. And I don't want to set any particular line item. I certainly don't want 20 line items. Maybe one or two, maybe even three, but a few. And if the chair of each subcommittee could report to me in regards to what those are, then we, in a workshop or at a future meeting, we can discuss it as a board and then approve that for those subcommittees to move forward with that. Now, we may decide to change a little thing here and there, and it's certainly, 6 months from now, that could all change, but at least to see where we are currently is what I would like to hear. Ms. Ray, you had a question?
Just an elaboration on that point. During a city council discussion of the school budget, it came up, what are the metrics that we're measuring the school department by, and I alluded to the goals and mission as being our reference documents. So I think that once we clean those up and come up with top priorities, it would be really illuminating to share that with the city council in order to help orient them a little bit better too. So I definitely think that's something, in addition to maybe meeting with the city council, that they'd be interested in seeing from the conversation we had.
Give me a moment here so I can write that down. And certainly these subcommittees will evolve as we see that anyhow. But I would like just to see what the current goals, so the entire school committee will be at least involved to that aspect. So thank you. Yes, Ms. Hutchinson.
Do you have a timeline as to when you want this?
Well, I realize that some subcommittees meet on a regular basis. Some actually email to each other, some even private messenger, or some sort of texting and so forth. But I'll give it a few meetings to report. If I get the information from you sooner, then great. I'll collaborate it and start working on it myself and certainly ask questions. But no, I don't have a specific timeline. I would say within the next month.
Might I suggest you put it at the end of the summer? Here's why. You've got committees that met today.
Right.
That won't meet again until July.
Right.
So if you do it in the next month, then the committees that met today have no chance to work as a group to come up with that. So I would suggest a month is not enough time.
Okay, certainly. Yeah, no, I expected we met certainly today, so it's going to be at least a month for each grouping of subcommittees to meet. But like I said, some people email, text, message, contact. Certainly if you get it done sooner, reach out to me, but I'll certainly give you plenty of time to work on it. If you're the last person, or last two groups that haven't contacted me, I'm certainly going to reach out to you and find out when that is, because I also want to plan out the workshop or the meeting that we'll be discussing this, and I don't want it to be too far out, but it could be at the end of the summer by the time I get to it too. So there's always plenty on the plate recently. Okay, just going back to my notes here. I just also wanted to mention that I've been honestly been impressed with the subcommittees and the progress. It's only been 4 to 5 months that we've been working on this, so very impressed. Considering the amount of involvement and the amount of work we have accomplished, it's sincerely impressive. I recognize that there is some confusion to the purpose to a regularly scheduled meeting with the subcommittees before a regular meeting. It's basically all new to us, so we're working on it. The meeting structure is new, provides an involvement which is different than in the past. An agenda is important and should be reported to me and the superintendent to review, as well as, we'll put it in the packet for everybody to review. If you have any difficulty determining an agenda, which I don't see anybody has had, please check with me. I'll be glad to make any suggestions. Also, remember that these meetings are also a good time to review, which I just mentioned, missions and goals. It's always good to come to the school committee for, which I just mentioned, for future review. Did I lose anybody there?
No. So I just want to clarify. So negotiations, we meet, we don't always meet on the regular scheduled subcommittee meetings. And when we do meet, we meet for several hours, or a whole day. So my question is, are the expectations that we still have to meet on that when everybody else is meeting for their subcommittee meetings. The reason why I ask is because I'm opposed to it unless there's something specific that we need to deal with, because we do spend a lot of time, and it's intense time. So sometimes it's nice to have a break.
Understandable, and I totally see that. I've been on negotiations, so I totally get what you're saying. The regularly scheduled subcommittee meetings before a meeting, let me just say, with negotiations, you're working on a current contract right now, so of course it's closed doors and so forth, and you vetted that. However, there are other things that can be discussed in negotiations, with such as upcoming contracts, your review of a contract, pre-planning for things like that, and to even just looking at the mission goals and statements and making sure that you're following on those things. Now, at the same time, if you feel you're comfortable and you got nothing better because you had a 10-hour meeting over the past week, I totally get it. But if you could just approach me or Mr. Webster so that we can add somebody else into that subcommittee chapter, because there's other subcommittees that, I mean, it'd be difficult to move it last minute, that's for sure. But if somebody else wanted to fit into there, I'd ask the chair to just let me know, and we'll make the adjustment necessary. So, does that answer your question? Okay. No, but I totally understand where you're coming from too. All right, so other things, I'm not done yet. Apologies for the agenda being sent out last minute. Mr. Webster lost his secretary due to vacation, which he definitely deserves. We had discussed it and reviewed it quite a little while ago, so there was plenty of time to send it out, but there was a lot of little things that needed to be changed and added to the packet. So hopefully that didn't interrupt too many people. It's difficult for me because I travel as I did this weekend, and but I made it ended up being a good meeting, and all the information was there. So I just want to razz them because I keep bugging them on this. So this week, National Teacher Appreciation Week. So if you you know, just make sure, I'm not saying go to every school and provide them with some materials, but at least just send them an email, say hello, thank you, or however you want to appreciate your local teacher. I'd suggest that you do something unique, or as big or as small as you'd like to do. After reviewing. Oh, okay. So we reviewed tonight the future school schedule, and we talked about workshops and so forth. Some of those things, workshops, included things that we've talked about briefly before, such as meeting with the Auburn School District. Mr. Webster has contacted Katie Grondin, the superintendent at Auburn, so they're working on, at least they touch base on that. So we're looking forward to doing something like that in the future. Also, there's been some other topics that have come up in the past several months. So Mr. Webster has reached out to the MSMA for various items they can bring to the workshops. Disciplinary and restorative practices. It might be good for the Student Engagement Committee to put together some notes. I know we talked about it briefly recently, but it might be good if you had some questions to gather some notes about restorative practices and so forth. Continuing to work with the superintendent on possibly restructuring the teaching and learning membership makeup of the committee. Nothing is official, but I will bring details and to report to the board as soon as possible. Been talking to Mr. Webster and possibly having a summer committee barbecue. Thought that would be good somewhere, whether it's on premise or off. Her house? Okay. You have a pool?
No,
okay.
but I have an outdoor bar.
Oh, as long as it's off premise. I'll bring one of those inflatable pools. It'll be good. Yeah. Also, who does not have business cards to the school committee? Okay. Okay. I can pass these on each side. So this is the business card I received about 2 years ago when I first. Well, actually, it's longer than that. If you would like some business cards, let me know, or Mr. Webster know, and
or Sue will order them for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I have barely even. I probably have 3 missing from the bundle I got 2 years ago. So I don't know if it's necessary.
If you don't need
if you don't need them, don't order them. But if you like some, I use them all the time. I mean, I go to chamber events and I run into people and other things as well.
So we had one board member that should remain nameless, who is no longer on the board, who distributed his card widely at the school where his children attended. And it was rather intimidating. I don't anticipate any of you use your cards that way, but it was just, I kind of chuckle about it as I think about it.
Yes, but so if you,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
can we allocate the funds from the business cards to somewhere else? Or does that go towards our
are you saying you want that to the barbecue? Yeah, no, I don't think that's how it works. No, this is a business matter, so we'll certainly keep it that way. I know it's been useful for me, so I just wanted to make sure that the new members that were not aware of that you can certainly get a business cards. I don't think we got more than 100, maybe 50, so it was a small packet, but it does become useful when necessary. And lastly, sorry for taking so long. I feel like I've taken too much time, but make sure you go vote tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Longley. So, and tell all your neighbors to go vote as well. And Ms. Parks would like to add a comment.
At one point in the not so distant past, a board member was away on vacation at the time of the vote, so he didn't vote. And the Sun Journal called him out publicly on that. So just so you know, if you don't vote, you could be condemned for it.
Adding the pressure. Bum, bum, bum. Yes, Ms. Hutchinson.
I will reiterate again, changes to the Teaching and Learning Committee conversation should be including myself and Mr. Shabbat before any changes are made.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Anything else? Okay, moving forward. Report from the school superintendent. Who would that be?
Right now,
Mr. Webster.
So just a few things to report on, and some of this you may already know. On Wednesday, there will be a student disciplinary hearing at 6 o'clock. This is a continuation of the one that you participated in a week or so ago. Secondly, there's not a regular meeting next week, but there is a grievance hearing, a level 3 grievance hearing on Wednesday, May 16th. I believe that's at 6 o'clock, but I've got to confirm that with the other party. Just one. Oh, level 3, yes. I'm sorry. Level 2 is to me, and level 3 goes to you. A reminder, and I know that you've received an invitation from the Lewiston Education Fund for a reception that will be next door beginning at 6 o'clock on May 21st. I know that conflicts with the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee meeting. However, I would say if you finish that meeting with a few minutes to spare, maybe you could step in. Yeah, so you can grab something to eat. And the LEF will be making a presentation during the school committee. So if you're completely miss it, you'll be able to hear that then. And then lastly, oh, excuse me.
Does everyone know what the Lewiston Education Fund is? old committee members are shaking their head yes, but.
Well, and part of this is to help educate. So just briefly, Lewis Energy Fund is a volunteer board that raises anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a year in support of Lewiston Public Schools. They have the Signature Grant Project, which in recent years has funded sending all middle school students to L.L. Bean, 7th grade, excuse me, for water and other activities they might not otherwise experience. And then there are also a number of individual teacher grants given out each year. I think the total there is around $20,000. Then the last thing, and this may be unnecessary for most of you, but just a reminder that Lewiston High School graduation is going to be on Friday night, June 8th, and the board is all invited to participate and help with the distribution of diplomas. There will be a robe, and I see Jake in the audience. I assume Jay Dufour will probably be contacting them in the near future about what you need for dress and just further details on that. Thank you.
Any further discussion, comments, or questions for the superintendent? The top 10? Mr. Langlis is asking about the, did everybody get their invitation to the luncheon?
I haven't yet, but I'll contact Sandy about that. I'll double check.
All right. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Ms. Parks.
Other than meetings and the top 10 luncheon and the graduation, what else do we have? I'm not getting the school committee calendar anymore for some reason. So what else should I have on my calendar? Or maybe I should just ask you this after, because it doesn't affect everything.
Well, one other thing, the adult ed graduation, I believe, is on June 6th.
Okay.
And there are probably other things.
June 6th, probably at 6 p.m. or it is.
Yes.
According
yeah.
to your calendar. Okay.
It should be, yes. So, is there anyone else that
I think
is?
because I switched phones, that's my issue.
Oh, okay. So you just need to set that. Okay, good.
Do you need help with that technology? Or?
I added 7 other calendars. I just can't add the school committee one for some reason. I think I just need to send you an invitation. I'm hoping that.
Talk to Sue or Dave. Further discussion. All right. Future agenda items that board members would like to see come up. Mr. Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we discuss Title I funding and possible reallocation?
Any others?
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Jensen, a second by Ms. Ray. Is that right? Okay, that's what I heard over there. Those not in favor? Those in favor? It's unanimous. I heard a chuckle. Have a good night, everybody.